internet. So with that, my good friend Matthew Rantanen and I have an announcement to make. And this really comes from probably, for me, 2 decades of doing this kind of work, of advocating on and for and behalf of Native peoples and working at home, working in Washington, D.C. on these issues, and meeting this wonderful organization, ISOC. So we'd like to announce that we are, I suppose this is what you call a soft launch. We are launching a North American Indigenous chapter of ISOC. So for several years now, Matt and I have both had the opportunity to co-chair the National Congress of American Indians Telecom and Technology Subcommittee. The National Congress is the largest intertribal government organization, largest and oldest in the United States. And it's kind of the largest umbrella. There are other intertribal organizations in the United States. Danae Wilson chairs the Utility and Telecommunications Committee of the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, 56 tribal nations in the Northwest United States. There are a number of representatives here from Canada. We want to cast a very inclusive and broad net to include folks, Indigenous folks and non-Indigenous folks that are with us, working on these issues throughout the United States and Canada. So with this announcement comes an invitation. We'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end, but we wanted to go through sort of what we're going to be doing in the North American Indigenous chapter.
So the chapter will have basically 3 pillars that we'll be focusing on. Obviously we can expand and evolve as the community dictates, but to start out the game, we're going to work with networking and education as a pillar, policy and advocacy as a pillar, and technical assistance and grant making as a pillar. So these are 3 areas in Indian country that, from personal experience in my 19th year now, and Jeff's been in it for 20 some years. We've got a wealth of knowledge of how things have been on an average with tribes in building these opportunities, and these are the places that there needs to be the most amount of interaction and support and just camaraderie and teamwork. And the ISOC chapter is an impressive way to pull this off. It's also a way for the indigenous populations of the world to talk together and then work through this chapter, and hopefully we will, incite some potential other indigenous chapters in the other parts of the world and be able to work together, or start a special interest group that then collects everybody from the world and we can talk about all our problems. Our problems are very similar. All the work I've done at IGF and an ICANN and the different internationals that we've done, and Jeff's been at WSIS and ICANN, and there's a lot of similarities in what we do with the indigenous on every continent. So we're really excited to bring together an opportunity and a resource and a space for people to be. We're working out the logistics with Kelly and with some advice from Kyle, and then some talking with the different groups, and we'll be submitting all the paperwork for that. But
so just to be clear also, we're not doing this to supplant any organization that is out there.
No.
We feel sometimes, at the National Congress of American Indians, for example, we can only do our policy making when the commission, commission, boy, that's an old.
You have not recovered.
I got to work that one out, don't I?
You've not recovered yet.
When the National Congress comes together. So in between those meetings, sometimes it's a challenge to keep the progress going, to keep folks involved. And really our thought in working with ISOC to do this is just simply to put one more tool in your toolkit of these issues. So these are pictures that actually come from my phone on that first slide. It's a picture from Kodiak, Alaska, where I'm happy to say that division from from my day job, AMERIND Risk, is deploying fiber across the island.
I'd like to just say, too, that this is just two examples. I know Shadi's here from Facebook and works a lot with the interaction with folks, especially in some of these levels. There's opportunities at Amazon, there's opportunities at Microsoft, and we feel like these engagements with these tech companies will really bring opportunity into the tribal space and get people more exposed to those opportunities and those software platforms and different things. But it's also building, realistically in the long run, it's building an employee base for a lot of these companies and building interest at a younger age and bringing people up through the process to be the next workers for some of these companies.
So tech meetups and events, just like what Matt was talking about. On this picture, actually on the left, is the famous Penobscot River, the Penobscot Nation in Maine. And on the right, it's rare, it's appropriate. I cannot take a picture from any further east, but this is a famous church on the top of Acoma Pueblo, the famous Masada of Indian country. And if you squint, the guy in the blue shirt is the former FCC chairman, Tom Wheeler. So.
Yeah, he's just a lobbyist.
What a great segue, policy and advocacy. So this is really where the rubber hits the road. I think I counted that there were 4 tables that talked about things that were directly related to either federal, nation-state advocacy in the United States and in Canada, and even potential international advocacy. We want to create a forum for the discussion at an international level about the rights of Indigenous populations in relation to nation states, in relations to industries, in relation to NGOs and other organizations. So it can really serve as a meeting place and as a technical assistant in this area, and really an opportunity to share, again, a tool in your toolkit. Between the two of us, we've been fortunate to be in certain places, like Abu Dhabi, when ICANN was talking about the Global Indigenous program. And there were so few other Indigenous representatives there. We just felt like it's an appropriate opportunity to create this and to create an atmosphere where those of us who've been steeped in policy development from many different organizations, we have Native Public Media represented here and others, can help share knowledge, can help spread, and help create another advocacy voice for Indian country.
Where are these 2 places?
This is the drive from Jemez Pueblo back to Albuquerque. Those are the famous Sandia. I think those are Sandia Mountains. And on the right is Chickaloon Native Village in Alaska. We were considering putting up the picture of the big table full of seal.
And was that when you and I were together in Alaska?
Yeah.
Patuk, that's when I ate southern seal.
Apparently the seal we were eating wasn't the desirable seal. So the last leg is technical assistance grant. Oh wow, the same picture got up there, huh? Yeah. I wonder who did that.
You didn't send
Matt.
Me. You didn't send me enough.
You did that, Matt. So I'm sorry. Who's the former art?
Former recovering.
So technical assistance.
Trust needs a road to drive on.
Look, at the end of the day, this stuff costs money, right? At the end of the day, we're talking about an expensive undertaking. And it's the kind of undertaking that you don't want to necessarily have to go through twice. You want to measure 2, 3, 4, 5 times and cut once. I've worked with tribal nations that have taken the shortcut, for instance, use point-to-point microwave. And then when rules came available to help them get fiber, politically they couldn't do it. So the other reason to create a chapter is to help with grant making.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a lot of experience in applying for grants and supporting grants and what it means to apply for grants versus setting up a different method to fund yourself, how to manage sustainability and grant making and things like that, and then how to align folks with funding opportunities, and obviously the ISOC Foundation as well.
So this is just pictures of fun things that you get to do with Indigenous folks. Yeah, you see bacon. Do you see the bacon ice
And
cream?
ghost pepper.
Ghost pepper ice cream.
Yeah. So you're on fire and cold at the same time. That's kind of fun.
For those of you who come from modern day lacrosse is descended from a stickball game that my father's people up and down the eastern seaboard of the United States played, and that is a stickball that's played over there on the right. The men have to use these awkward long sticks and throw the ball with two hands, try to hit a goal on the top of a pole. And the lady who's behind him, she's the one who's catching the ball because he doesn't know how to throw it with the stick. Actually, he's a friend. He really is not good at this game. That's the reason why I took a picture, because his wife is a lot better than he is. But she gets to use her hand in the game. But it is the way, stickball is the way that many of the tribes in the southeastern and eastern United States dealt with one another at a diplomatic level. And it has become emblematic of how tribal nations in my home of Oklahoma work together, so much that these stickball sticks have become
Treasure.
well, they're symbols of our relationships with other tribal nations.
And so the bottom left is the very first Indigenous Comic-Con that happened in Albuquerque, and it's an amazing industry. It's growing like crazy. It's going to be in March next year in the Convention Center in Albuquerque downtown, and it's actually grown leaps and bounds. More and more artists are getting published. There's native publishers now. The industry's really growing. Some of them are printing with a native printer that I happen to know and maybe run. And then there's these are just all the different angles of what some of the things that broadband can affect in communities. So the native vote is huge, and communication for that native vote is massive. And there's a groundswell for voting again in this next election, and National Congress of American Indians is very behind this, the native vote. The creative space, the game space, and the retail space.
So I'm very fortunate. As a citizen of Albuquerque, New Mexico, my member of Congress is an enrolled member of a federally recognized Indian tribe, Deb Holland. I never imagined that would happen in my lifetime, and I've worked for the United States federal government. So maybe, Matt, you can say a few words about making sure if folks want to get involved, how they can become involved.
So as we are finalizing paperwork, turning things in, getting things signed off and reviewed by the formal process, we would ask that if you are interested in being on the notification list and want to be a part of this, please email Kelly at ISOC. What is the address itself? elkins@isoc.org.
So we'll make sure before we all leave that you have the contact information.
And then
Keep going.
you were going to offer up your phone number.
Well, I really like the human touch, actually. I really like talking to people, and there are a lot of folks in the room that I got to know directly. So I'm going to give you my telephone number. If you have questions about this, call me, and I will call you back.
Kyle, will you write it on that backboard?
And then I'll give it again tomorrow. It's my old DC number. It's area code 202-253-4846.
Or we can write it.
Yeah, we'll write it down. But we just want to close by saying a very sincere thank you and a great deal of respect to ISOC. Thank you, Andrew, Mark, and team. No, because they
We're
have...
counting on it.
Because, well, wait, let me get my thank you out. We want to thank them because they have been really willing to work with us as we envision creating this in a very native way. We do have a separate set of laws and policies that apply to our nations, and they've been very open to discussing how we do this in a way that both complies with their policies and our choices of laws and routines. So,
and not to spoil it a little bit, but I just will say the founder ISOC, Vince Cerf, or one of the creators of ISOC, Vince Cerf, believes in this very strongly and has dedicated money towards the chapter as it develops, and we're really excited about that. So,
again, to reiterate, an invite to get involved. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
So enjoy the chili, enjoy the coffee. Hope you had a good day. We're going to hear from the head of state, Dennis Bumpy Kanahele, from the independent and sovereign nation of Hawaii. And here to introduce him is Katie Hale from Bay Cells.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Hale with Bay Cells Technologies. It's okay. I get it all the time. We are one of the sponsors for this great event. So we are an LTE manufacturer, and we deal primarily with ISPs in North America for rural broadband and building networks for underserved communities. So I just want to say thank you to ISOC for this event and putting this on. And if you have any questions or want to talk about LTE or networks in underserved areas or rural broadband, we're in the back and we will be here all week. We will also be leading a training and helping the community later in the week build a network. So further ado, I'll introduce Bumpy. Here you go. I'm going to put, oh, I'm going to put
Okay. Maybe I should sit in the middle, right in the middle over here. Let's figure this out now. All right. E iho no luna e piano lalo e huiana na moko e ku na kapai a. E iho no luna e piano lalo e huiana na moko e ku na kapai a. E iho na luna e piano lalo e huiana na moko e ku na kapai a. E iho no luna e piano lalo e huiana na moko e ku na kapai a. Aloha. Oh, okay. Oh, my name is Pu'onua Bumpy Kanahele. I'm the head of state of the nation of Hawaii, and I wanted to start off not so much in a technical world, because there's a lot of things going on in Hawaii that most of you might not be aware of, and if you see Hawaiians acting funny or doing stuff that is like, you know, not normal, that's because something like this happened to us. And so I want to hit on, you know, how the nation of Hawaii came about, you know, and leading right into what we're doing today to actually have a broadband system for our nation, you know, when we get back to Honolulu. But in 1893, our queen, the Hawaiian kingdom, was overthrown with the help of missionaries or descendants of missionaries, sugar planters, corporations. And there was so much turmoil in Hawaii, you know, for Hawaii, that finally in 1893 the queen was overthrown, and you know, immediately the people that was responsible as Committee of Safety, they took over, put our queen in her palace under house arrest. So she was arrested in 1894. She stayed in a palace, I'm not sure how long it was, but until they completely, you know, wiped us out at that level. Then in 1897, there was a resurgence trying to restore. There were a lot of our ancestors were trying to fight for the right to restore her. And that almost took place with one president, that was President Cleveland, during that time. And that president was the first one said, yes, the United States committed an act of war against the Hawaiian people, blah, blah, blah. So 1897 was pivotal because the United States claimed to have annexed, or the state of Hawaii claimed to have annexed Hawaii, or based on acquiring Hawaii, that there was an annexation that took place. No, that's not true. There was a very, very strong movement in Hawaii at that time to restore the crown, and we called it ku'e. It's a ku'e petition. And the Kauai petition was against the annexation. Almost 38,000 signatures. At that time, they were going from island to island in canoes. And can you imagine that? And different islands and gathering up all these signatures so that their representatives could take it to America and say, well, we don't want to be annexed. Anyway, so the U.S. Congress just passed a simple joint resolution, and that is what how Hawaii was transferred over to the United States. Didn't end there. In 1900, they realized that they had to create an organic act, a constitution to govern the territory of Hawaii. Then, what was interesting after that, in 1921, the United States created the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. Now, I have a problem with that because to begin with, the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act set a blood quantum situation in place, which became real divisive. You know, today, Hawaiians with less than 50% Hawaiian, you don't get any land. Hawaiians that got 50% or more, you have an opportunity to get the land. And with the cost of living and all that stuff, you know, we got maybe over 30,000 Hawaiians on the waiting list to get Hawaiian homelands. And that happened in 1921. Now, all along, all these years, I kept thinking, you know, what happened after the Queen was deposed? What happened to the people? They were nationals that had Hawaiian national passports, not U.S. passports. They were nationals of a country. So what happened to the people, right, along the way? 1893, 1897. 1921, to me, was a holding cell for the national sovereignty of the Hawaiian people. And it's very, very obvious because Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, and I heard Merrill said that today, Hawaiian Homes Commission Act is not a federally recognized program. How come? If we're not this and we're not that, then who are we? I can tell you that we're going to reach 1993, then I'm going to tie everything in. So in 1921, the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act happens. The holding cell is put out for the Hawaiian people to make sure that they can keep their identity in place, their national identity in place. Why? Because 1945, for those of you who know about the United Nations, Hawaii entered into the United Nations as a non-self-governing territory in 1945. And that 1945, in 1945, Article 73 of the UN Charter was to decolonize. Decolonize. The Article 73A specifically says to ensure with due respect to the culture of the peoples concerned, their political, economic, social, educational advancement, just treatment, and protection against abuses. That never happened for Hawaii. 14 years later, we became a state, 58th state. Now, in that process from 1945 to 1959, the United States is supposed to take the Hawaiians by the hand and show them how to decolonize themselves from the system. That was part of it. Now, a non-self-governing territory can say it has reached a full measure of self-governance by integration with an independent state, free association with an independent state, or independence. And when you look at the three choices, Hawaii didn't fit because we were overthrown. And so the standard integration, free association, independence, for us it was restoration of independence. So statehood happened, and from statehood to 1993, that was a crucial thing in the beginning of Hawaii, the nation of Hawaii. 1993, in July on my birthday, actually, I got a call from the governor at that time, Waihe'e, and he asked me to sit on the Sovereignty Advisory Commission, 21-member Sovereignty Advisory Commission. So, and we were on the beach at Makapu. We were occupied land, and I'm telling the governor, why me? I don't believe in a state. I don't believe in a federal government. He said, well, I thought you would have a different view in this commission. And so I said, you know what, I'll jump on the board. So I became a state commissioner for the Sovereignty Elections Council in 1993. And I was the chairperson for the International Law Committee. It was known as Legislative Mandate Beyond, I forgot that part. Anyway, so what happened was this committee could bring in international lawyers. And just so happened from October, when we started to work on getting the international lawyers here, because we wanted to get somebody to tell us what's happening with this apology law, right? That was the key thing, was what's happening with this apology law? You know, the senators at that time were saying, well, it's just an apology, and all that. And so in October, the Senate, U.S. Senate, passed the apology law. And when they did that, the attorney I was in touch with, finally I sent him the stuff. I said, hey, you got to come here, give us an opinion. In the next week, the House, or the following week, the House, on November 15th, signed the apology law. And on November 23rd, President Clinton signed that into effect. And when that happened, a lot of us know they admitted to the crime now. And when you look at the whereas clause, 37 whereas clauses on that, every whereas clause is exactly what they did to us. You know what the beautiful thing of this apology was? They told us who we were in the very first whereas clause. If you ever get to look at U.S. Public Law 103, 150, in the beginning it says, whereas prior to the arrival of the first Europeans in 1778, the Hawaiian people lived in a highly organized, self-sufficient, subsistent social system based on communal land tenure. It didn't stop there. We had a sophisticated language, culture, and religion. Then whereas clause, it destroyed all of that. So when the professor came in, it was on December 28th, to give his opinion. It was at the Mabel Smythe Auditorium. There was about 1,000 people there. And so he grabs the apology law. He goes, first read the law. First thing occurred to me is, now that the United States have finally conceded to the illegal throw of the Hawaiian people can now proclaim the restoration of their independence. Something our Queen and I tried to fight for back in the 1800s. Finally, it come through the passing of this law. And that is what's stirring up Hawaiians today. Because that opened the door to a lot more information on Hawaiian kingdom laws, Hawaiian this, Hawaiian that. And our people are learning. I mean, for God's sakes, we got damaged like many other countries in the world. But we got damaged to a point, it was more like of a clandestine manipulation towards genocide. And what Francis said was, with this law, he can prove that genocide has been committed against the Hawaiian people. Now, the only way And he goes on to say that the only way that a peoples can ever be safe from extermination is to become an independent state. You know, like how we're trying to be independent broadband producers, right? Independent. So you're in total control of that. And so that's why our people are in that dilemma about, you know, this is ours, that is ours, the sacred Mauna. You know, our queen was ridiculed, put in prison in her own palace to make sure that nobody else would ever look at any figure in the Hawaiian community that way. That's the sad part. You know, we gotta tell this story and you realize, like, holy moly. So I asked Francis after that night, because it was unbelievable. His whole, you can find that on nationofhawaii.org. But all the information is on our website, all these documentation and stuff like that. I talked to Francis after and I said, Francis, what do we have to do? He said, proclaim the restoration of your independence, Bumpy. You gotta do that. So in 1994, we got together with Francis and the kupunas, the elders from So we got together with the elders from all the islands and talked about it. And Francis told the kupuna, now you don't have to build an organic document or a constitution that is like the United States of America or some other country. From what he's seen, and I took him through all the islands to have this talk during that time, he said, you already have a system. You have a ohana system. You know, you have the keiki, you have the opio, you have the makua, you have the kupuna, the age kids of our people. And so during that year in 1994, January 16th, a day before the commemoration of the overthrow, 1994, we proclaimed the restoration of our independence and immediately went into a constitutional convention. And all year, 1994, all the way through 95, and finally at the end of 95, we came to an agreement with this document. And January 16, 1995, we promulgated the Hawaii Constitution, all based on our ohana. You know, it's not based on anything else. And so the tribunal was set up, an executive branch was set up, and a general assembly with the two branches of government. The kupuna, the elders, would be in control of the tribunal, and to make sure that we don't go through the same scenario again that happened to us. And in between all these years from 93 to now, the nation has totally gone into a whole different progressive, forward, active movement to not spend a lot of time on politics, because we're already the nation. As far as we're concerned, we're the nation. That's our political situation. And we're going to build the foundation like how we're building the broadband foundation for our people. It's so like it has it just wraps around each other, the two things, our nation building and the broadband building, and quite frankly, everything else we're doing. Again, we've never had help from the state or the federal government. We were afraid to get federal money because then they got you on the books and start looking into your stuff. Even though we took an independent stance, we had to create a nonprofit organization. That was the farthest I would go into America to be part of that. Hawaiian by birth, American by force now. True story. So when when I see what we're doing today, bringing everything to what we're doing today, it's a nation. It's the rise of a digital nation. That's something. How many? I'm going to ask this question. How many of you guys got digital IDs? Raise your hand. Digital IDs? Anybody? Digital IDs? No emails in here. Anybody got emails? Raise your hand. Same thing. See, that's what I learned, right? So now I get a state driver's license. I get a U.S. passport. I get a Hawaiian ID, and now I get a digital ID. I realize, all right, or email address. I like digital because that starts to flip our mind into like what we're talking about. And if we don't start talking that way, who's going to believe in a digital world, right? I mean, it's old, but it's new. For us, it's a dream, And we've never worked with the state government at all, not even the federal government, for God's sakes. If you cannot do them yourself, then don't build a country. That's what we feel. That's how we think. Why? Why do we need their help? You know what? The monies you guys get, we can take like about 5% of that and build a whole other city. And so the movement, there's like many different levels of the Hawaiian movement today in Hawaii. Some want federal recognition. They want that status so that possibly they could have federal benefits and all that. I think we've been through that scenario to see that our brothers and sisters in America are not getting a fair shake on the federal recognition. So why would we want that, right? Why? Now, we're the real deal. You're not going to find any more real deal than Bumpy Kanahele, the Nation of Hawaii, Brandon Maka'ava, John Garcia. You're not going to find anything. And I think this way, the relationship with the state of Hawaii through DBED, Bert, and introducing us to ISOC, the Internet Society, Mark, Matthew. Man, you guys, that makes, the pain that we get, makes it better when you can, shoot off into another exciting opportunity, right? And make that work. And so that's what drives us away from being so kolohe. And believe me, when I see all people on a mountain getting arrested, when I see them getting arrested in Waimanalo or Kahuku or Kalai, we don't like that. But then if we get sidetracked by everything that's going on out there, we won't be in the situation we are, and that's why we're here today, because we have the opportunity through these guys, through Bert. Bert, we're going to vote you for governor, bro. They told me I had plenty of time, bro. No, and I just wanted to share that. And for you that have experience, and for the women that have children, the men in here, we cannot ever imagine how it feels to give birth. Ever, right? But the women can tell us how it feels. In this movement, we can tell you how it feels. We come from a community. We're seeing the ups and downs and lows, and we still live in that community, And these technologies and things like this going to bring so much joy to people. I mean, in our village, my daughter-in-law, when my grandchildren were going high school, I think what was happening is she had to get her stuff online in the next city over. So she drove down to her parents' house, get online, fast speed, everything like that. And it didn't dawn on me that it was a hassle, It was a hassle, not only a hassle, But then they worked through it. They spent the time to take the children and get adjusted to the digital world in school. Because not everybody in a homestead have access to that. The in-house, our kids are failing and falling back, not in school. They can do their work in school, but they cannot do their work at home because their home don't have any computer or technology. And my dream is to just stack them up and get that, get the lines in there, make sure that they have the ability to be on the same playing field with every other child that is in there. Our community is, and I'm sure you folks see and have communities in that situation, but like, we live in our community. Brandon and I, John, we don't live in a village. Where you guys gonna come on Thursday, we don't live there. It almost like I live there, but I'm there morning, noon, night, and go home to sleep. And because where I live in a homestead, there's like the poverty level and the abuse and all that stuff is so high, overcrowding, all that stuff, that I didn't want to forget that. So I stay home. We can build all the things we want to build at night. And just so you know, that when we did occupy Makapu back in the day, all the people were homeless or houseless. And we totally forgot about that. Yeah, Brandon, we forgot about that our village was made up of more homeless and houseless than you have on the streets. And but we didn't think of that. Everything went forward. They bettered their lives. You started getting a lot of the human resource help, from people donating their times and all that. But I can tell you that this is like the broadband setup and learning all this stuff is so exciting for us. We had a meeting before we left with our families up there and make sure that we're going to feed you guys well and we're going to do all this stuff that, Ninau has done over here and with their workers and all that. Thank you for the food. That was beautiful today. But we kind of preparing. You guys are going to have good fun over there. Not too many people come into our village, because for one reason or another, even the police ask permission before they come in. The FBI, well, they kind of play a little bit rough, but our gate bigger now. It's an automatic gate, so you gotta break through our gate, bro. You will damage your car, Nah, but I think that is pretty much who the nation of Hawaii is, and the things that I wanted to share so that that's no wonder these Hawaiians doing this or the Hawaiian is doing that, because it is, they have the right to do that. Excuse them. They know what they're doing. They have the right to do that, but please excuse them. That's their kuleana. That's why they're doing that. They're not doing it to spite you or anything like that. It's an ongoing thing for hundreds of years now. And how do we fix it? I guess we got to use aloha more harder than we ever did before, because that's what it's all about. You come to Hawaii, it's all about aloha. It's all about that. So we cannot fight back, even if we wanted to. No way. Our ancestors wouldn't let us do that. But we can fight with this, with our brains, with our communications, with the engagement, the engagement that Geoffrey was talking about. Explore and engage. I like that. Anybody want to ask questions or go ahead, brother.
Have you thought about that time
yeah.
when that happens and how you're going to address that?
Well, we have elections, right? It's a democratic process. So in our Constitution, we are. See, when it started, I got appointed as the head of state, and I was stuck with that job ever since 25 years ago, 24 years ago. And so I never finished this story. Let me go real fast to 1995. After we worked out some details with the state to get on a property, the feds came after me in August of 1995. I was doing talks in San Francisco. We flew to Maui, my wife and I, and we met the elders there. We stayed over and had a big talk and a dinner, and I was on my way to Kauai the next day. So on my way, it was supposed to go a direct flight. They asked to stop to refuel, or something was wrong with the plane, change planes or something like that. And as I was coming off the plane, me and my wife, these black cars came right onto the runway with marshals and FBI agents. And as I was coming down the stairs, they pulled me inside of the car. So, that happened in August. In November, by the time November came around, you had people like churches going to bat for me, going in and like trying to put that kind of pressure on the federal government, because it was the federal government that came after me. As the head of state, we executed some human rights violation citations using the Genocide Act, US 100-606, and we started to actually file charges against police officers. The state couldn't handle me. That's why the feds came in, because we filed against the federal judges too. And one judge just said, no, you're threatening us. And so that's how I got pulled in. And so there was a fabrication of all that stuff. So that in 1996, what happened is I came out in 1995. They kept me in prison for about 3.5 months, no bail. And the apology bill, the federal judge took my foundation, the apology bill, right out of my case. And I was left hanging. Yeah, we tried to bring in my international attorney and all that. So they really, I was going through a kangaroo situation that time, just to stop what we were doing, because we had set up our own tribunals. So we had judges, our kupuna were the judges, and we had on every island. So now filing charges against these guys and having to come to our courts, we switched everything on them. So we're bringing summons to SWAT team officers. I mean, my guys went right into the police department, right into the SWAT central headquarters to issue human rights violation citations. True story. So low-key, I don't think it's low-key, it's kind of, they forgot about us, you know? They forgot about us.
Bumpy.
But, okay, sorry.
A round of applause. And I had an opportunity to meet Edward last night, and he's lived in as many places around the world as I have, so it was impressive. You've actually even lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico, my hometown.
Yes, I have. Okay, thank you. Aloha, everyone. Mahalo, and thank you for having me the opportunity to be in front of all of you guys. I want to tell you just a little brief story about my connection to Hawaii. I had gone to all black schools up until I was in 3rd grade. And then we moved from Kansas City to Southern California. And my first teacher in Southern California was Hawaiian. And it was her first time outside of the island. So we were both new to being in a new environment. It was an amazing experience. It was there that I learned that the world was much bigger than I anticipated. Hawaii at that point was this remote, romantic place, and she brought it in home to us. We learned about Hawaiian history. I learned how to sing pearly shells in Hawaiian years ago. But it was a wonderful experience, something that I have always taken with me. So community is an interesting thing, and I'm part of NANOG. NANOG stands for the North American Network Operators Group. We are North American based, and we serve the broader community in terms of the internet. NANOG goes back to about 1987. I'll put this down and just talk out of my head. It goes back to 1987 to Merit Networks. And the focus is the advancement of the network infrastructure within North America. Oh, I do have notes. All right. We are a community-driven organization. Roots back to 1987, as I mentioned. Our original charter was formed in 1994. And we received our independence from Merit, so we kind of based out of. And I'll get through this really quickly. And NANOG is currently the largest network operators group. Next slide, please. What do we do? We have educational conferences. We're a 501c3 educational charter, and our focus is educating people on current and future advances in network engineering or network infrastructure within our region. We're designed and we focus on empowerment and education. I've been the executive director at NANOG for like a little over a year and a half, and I'm trying to get the organization to branch out beyond what it normally focuses on, which was just kind of self-focused on these conferences and educating these engineers who are already a part of the system. Now I'm trying to get the organization to kind of branch out a little bit more, and part of that branching out what brings me here and looking to see what we can do to support the efforts of Indigenous communities and help to build out networks and support the build out of networks across North America. Next slide, please. Our community consists of 13,000 individuals who take part in our mailing lists or attend our conferences in some form or another. Our conferences averages between 1,000 to 1,300 attendees. 200 of who attend our conferences are first time, and they come from 20 countries around the world. Next. So what is a NOG? NOGs are community-driven organizations that look to support local and regional internet professionals, guided by the principle of a fair and open exchange of information. They're formed by network operators. These are not commercial enterprises. Commercial entities don't have power within NOGs. They're all based upon community support and also between members being a part of them. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, they're driven by individuals, not corporations. They are, it's all about teaching and learning, and they're also designed to focus on the needs within their communities. Part of the support that we do now for NANOG, we're supporting other smaller NOGs within our regions. We're doing support within CaribNOG, helping in the areas of the Caribbean, and we're also neutral, and we are non-political. Next. How can you benefit from NOGs? Some of the brightest minds in the industry will be at our conferences. We have people who were there at the inception. In fact, Matt has had the pleasure of presenting at NANOG a couple of times, and in his talks, he talked about the efforts in Indigenous networks within North America, and they have been some of the most popular talks that we've had in NANOG in recent years. It's because people do care, and sadly enough, a lot of people within North America do not realize the gap that occurs in rural and Indigenous communities. And people like Matt coming along, speaking to them, showing people what the need is, and trying to engage people to get involved is a big part of what happens at NANOG. So outreach, I've kind of talked around it and I'll talk directly toward it. Since I've been executive director, outreach has been a big component of the focus of what I want to see happen within NANOG. To be able to reach out beyond ourselves, to know that the world is much bigger than what we look at, and seeing how we can help support efforts across our community and the world that we live in. Next slide. So we have three focuses for outreach for NANOG. Focus one is trying to educate industry people for professional advancement. Two is working with colleges and universities, trying to get them to engage within and see career opportunities within the network operator community. We have our first university outreach tour, which is occurring next week. We're going to 3 colleges, and we're trying to get them engaged and see the opportunities that are available for network operators. I'm going to be doing some STEM talks as well, trying to even reach a younger generation to get them more engaged in technology and see the opportunities that are there. And then finally, we're looking to expand out to do training in underserved regions, in areas where, for example, as I said, in indigenous populations that don't have adequate access. So we're hoping to be able to engage with you. We're hoping to be able to find opportunities where we can get synergy. As I mentioned, we are an educational nonprofit. We're not going to actually physically build the networks for you, but the goal is to empower you to be able to control your own communities and your own destination. Next slide. So to learn more about some of the resources that we have a mailing list. Anyone can join the mailing list. We also have all of our presentations, except for a very few that focus on security, are all streamed live and they're all recorded. So this is a link to our YouTube feed where there are literally hundreds of talks and tutorials that you can take apart and listen to. And then we also have a section which focuses on our outreach and details what we're doing in those areas. And then there's also articles and stories that we produce that reflect the industry and what you may find there. And then finally, mahalo. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. If you have any questions, I'm around. One thing that I do want to pitch that NANOG does on top of that is we have what's called the NCI program, which is the NANOG College Immersion. We look for instructors that will sponsor up to 5 students to come and attend a NANOG meeting. We cover airfare, we cover the registration, hotel, lodging, all of it, we cover it because we're trying to get more young people engaged and create more opportunities. And we also have a scholarship program where we give away $10,000 to students who are looking to pursue careers in network engineering and
Hello, everyone. I first just want to introduce the discussion that we're going to be doing. We're talking about using the internet to support Indigenous youth leadership. There was a bit of a mistake in the agenda, but that's okay. There's a lot of pieces coming together today, so mistakes are going to happen. And in BC and a lot of parts of Canada, one of our protocols is to do a land acknowledgement. A land acknowledgement is not a part of my own culture, so what I like to do is I like to acknowledge the protectors and caretakers of this land here, who have been taking care of this land for hundreds of years and much longer than colonization. And I like to acknowledge Mother Earth. She has her own story before buildings were here, before we were here. This land that we're on right now has her own story. She has her own family. She has her own history. And I like to acknowledge that before beginning, and it helps me ground myself into the space. So how many people here are Indigenous youth or Indigenous youth advocates? Oh, great. So this is our community, and we're hoping to expand this community much wider today. So my name is Linnea Dick. I'm Kwakwaka'wakw and Nisga'a and Tsimshian from the northwest coast of Canada. And as a young person, I really struggled to find my voice. Because of oppression, I struggled with my identity, and I didn't feel that I had any power to create change around me as I grew up. And as a result, I struggled with things like alcoholism, eating disorders, bullying, a lot of things.
Hello everyone, Chu, Uklama Hotwith Wayness. My name is Joshua Watts, and I'm from the Nuu-chah-nulth and Coast Salish Nations in BC. Coming to you today from Victoria, and just wanted to share a bit about my personal story for a quick note. So I grew up outside of my ancestral community, and it kind of had a bunch of different chain effects in my life that I didn't really realize till now. But I'm mentioning that because through platforms that are through the internet, I was able to kind of talk about something a little bit different. We talked a lot about connecting to each other with the internet during this summit, but for my part of this presentation, I'd like to talk about how the internet can be used to connect to yourself in a different way. So yeah, it's a little bit about me.
And this is me. I came into the world like a beam of light, clearly. And I've continued to try to spread that light. And one of the ways that I was able to spread that light was through activism and advocacy. So as I mentioned before, part of my history was really challenging, really dark, and I suffered a lot. There was suffering in my life, as I'm sure a lot of you have had. And something that was really hard for me was that feeling of loneliness, feeling like I was the only one in the world who had a perspective of wanting to make the world a better place, wanting to connect with those around me, and just wanting to have a different worldview on the way that things happen in the world. And how many people here know about what I Don't Know More is? So a few of you. So I Don't Know More was the biggest Indigenous protest that have ever happened in Canada, and I Don't Know More did reach some places globally. And through I Don't Know More and my relationship with my dad, who was an artist in activist in his community and a chief, I was able to find my voice and become that leader that I wanted to be. And so what we did through I Don't Know More was create our own movement. It was called ōlelo, which means to make a statement, and we used culture as a way to respond to policy and government, to have ceremonies that reinstilled that strength within people.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the work that I do through the internet, and this is an image actually of an old John Weber drawing, and it was made in the late 1700s. He was an artist aboard the Captain Cook expedition, and the article I want to talk about in the middle is actually a mask. It's a seagull mask, and this is an actual image of the actual object that's held in the British Museum, and this slide is kind of like an example of a tool that a lot of Northwest Coast artists and cultural carriers, such as myself, often see when we're surfing the web. I don't have access to the British Museum's collection in person, but however, I'm able to access a ton of information just based on these online databases. And so that's allowed me to extend the span of my work that I do. A lot of the work is in communities, working with families to work on their potlatch ceremonial objects, and that was kind of something I wanted to demonstrate to everyone here.
And this young lady here is my daughter, and we're speaking back to culture and knowledge. The internet has been a way that I've been able to connect with my daughter and be the guidance that she needs, especially when it comes to the language. So this is my ōlelo, which means reason for being. And a couple of years ago, when she was only 5 or 6, I was telling her to get her shoes on. And so I said, "Sweetheart, get your D-Bayou on." And she said, "No, Mom, it's not D-Bayou, it's D-Bayou, because it's 2 shoes." And she has had the fortune of growing up in our community, and she teaches me a lot of our language all the time. But as a mother, sometimes I really struggled with not being able to champion her, not being able to be the one who's teaching her the language. And so I have been able to utilize tools like First Voices, which is an app that a lot of First Nations in Canada use to share language. There's also cultural groups and language groups on Facebook, as well as our cultural leader in our community who's doing a lot of the language revitalization work is my cousin. Her name is Pee-wee Alfred, and her information is so accessible because every day she does a word of a day and a sentence of a day on her own personal Facebook profile. And so in that way, I've been empowered to be that leader for my daughter, but also to instill that strength within her so that that strength can continue on for future generations.
I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about this expedition that I was a part of earlier this year. And it was an expedition off the coast of Vancouver Island. We went out about 200 kilometers offshore, and the objective was to find a bit more information on these sponge and coral forests that are on top of the summits of seamounts that are under the water. And so this is our team. We're all broad backgrounds. I was the New Toronto representative, and I just wanted to ask a quick question. Does anybody know what this big white globe is on our boat? It's a technical question, but yeah, it was our satellite aboard. I didn't really know why it was on the boat for a long time when I was on there, and I would sit on the deck and wonder, like, what is this? But I saw Ocean Networks Canada, and I just wanted to share a little bit about the resource that we had online. All of our live streaming content, all of our communications was through that satellite. And the reason why I'm talking about this expedition is because part of the work that I was doing on board was reaching out to kids and students that were involved with science camps back on the mainland. And something that the internet is often used for in Indigenous communities in Canada is it's a way to bring an experience, bring some education into a community that may have not had that opportunity to bring a live person or to bring them out to the experience. And so we were just Zoom calling some of the kids, and I'm just showing them our funny microscope cover, which is a minion. And yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that these are Indigenous kids that were participating, and we were presenting the live science, and it just made them feel like they were a part of that work, and I just wanted to reiterate how special that was. This is a group photo of Linnea and I, and we were working with a nonprofit called Waterlution, and they, I guess in a nutshell, they educate people based on how important water is, and so anything related to water, and us being coastal First Nations, we wanted to talk about our connection with the water, but also how our whole Mother Earth is connected through the water. All our communities are connected through the water. And so we often spend time using Zoom calls as another way to bring that education to the classrooms that may not be able to cover the cost or have really a budget to have that experience for the children.
The internet is a great way to support nonprofit organizations and Indigenous youth. I work for a nonprofit organization called We Matter. And what We Matter is an online-based campaign that focuses on the stories and voices of Indigenous youth. The co-founders are Calvin and Tanchai Redfern, and they grew up in Hay River, Northwest Territories, which is a bit of a more rural area of Canada. And growing up there themselves and what they saw in their communities was a lot of struggles. And a few years ago, prior to them founding this organization, there was a series of suicide pacts that happened in the Northwest Territories. 3 communities got hit, and children as young as 10 committed suicide. And so their idea was to create something that was different, and they actually started with a group of 10 videos. And these videos were a way to reach young people. What they did was they reached out to role models, Indigenous leaders, allies, to create messages to instill within youth that no matter how hopeless life may feel, there is always a way forward, and that they are never alone in what they're experiencing. And so one of the really cool things about this campaign is that we had people such as Ashley Collingbull submit a message. a woman who is widely admired by Indigenous young ladies, and she shared some of her struggles.
And I just wanted to connect Hawaii to Northwest Coast culture. A couple of years ago, I was a part of a cultural exchange, and what we did is we raised funds with our community from the Squamish Nation, and we actually brought a group of around 20 youth to Oahu. And the experience, I think it was about 2 weeks we were here, and the experience we got was something that was not just tourism-based, it was actually coming to the communities. I believe we stayed in the Leleokalani Center. I'm not sure exactly where it was on the island, but we were touring the island with the community here, and it all started from there's a gathering in BC that's called Tribal Journeys, and it's annual now, but all the coastal First Nations will venture to the host nations, and the Hawaiian Indigenous people would sometimes participate in those, and that's how we linked up and connected. And so I just wanted to mention that. This is some pictures of we're actually helping plant some plants on the island, and a lot of the kids really take that experience and they share about it still. It's made a long-term impact in their lives. And I just wanted to connect it to the internet. How it's relevant is that we weren't able to organize that without the use of the internet, without the kids, researching into their family's genealogy and finding out where they're from, and it just made the experience that much more meaningful. And there they all are. There we all are. This is just a video of us. We're paddling in the ocean because they first came to BC in the canoe. They wanted us to try out their canoes over here on the island.
This is a piece that was done by my dad. His name is Bo Dick, and he passed away a few years ago. And this piece he actually did for my older sister when her school was having their own potlatch in Haida Gwaii, which is a traditional ceremony. So they were doing like a play potlatch so that they can learn about those traditions and what those ceremonies look like and how to organize them, so that's instilled in them when they're young. And it actually depicts a circle of young people holding hands, because my dad was a true believer that young people were the ones who were going to lead the way and create that change that's needed to heal and to move forward in a good way. And this is a picture of me and my friend Summer. And my friend Summer, I actually haven't met. I've known her for a couple of years, and this is my first time meeting her just a couple of weeks ago. And I actually met her because I was invited to join an Australian Canadian Indigenous youth group, where we would meet every month, share some of the challenges that we face in our own regions, in our own countries, and work together to try to fill some of those gaps and try new programs and share information. So I think that the internet is really fundamental in global outreach, a way that we can all learn from each other and collectively have that voice to create the changes that we want to make as Indigenous people protecting our lands. It really is about protecting all of Mother Earth. And there are Indigenous people across the world who are fighting the same fights that we are in Canada, in Hawaii, in Australia. And so I think that the internet is a really important part of that. And I was really excited to meet Summer for the first time. And it brings me back to a word that my dad used to always share with me, and that word is lalakinis. And lalakinis means coming and going in all directions. And my dad often referred to this word when he talked about activism, because he never felt that it was Indigenous, or that feminism was just for women, or that environmental issues were just for people who lived in rural areas. He really believed that it was about all of us coming together and recognizing that we are all going in different ways, in different directions. We all have our own experiences, our own individual identities, and And thank you for being a part of this conversation. I know that went really fast and we touched on a lot of things really quickly. And please feel free to come and ask us questions, learn more about the things that we're doing, because there's so much more to this conversation. This is 10 to 15 minutes of quickly the different ways that the internet can be utilized to support Indigenous youth leadership. But it's also a way to start a conversation on opportunities and possibilities. There are a lot of concerns and fears in our communities, which are all very valid. But I just wanted to offer a new perspective, and something that I see in my own community sometimes is that when elders and older generations have that fear, have that apprehension for change, it's often the young people that inspire them. And that's why youth leadership is so important altogether, whether you're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, and no matter where you live in the world. Do the closing.
So just to kind of we wanted to end it off with a little bit of a fun question. And it came to mind that we often define ourselves by what we do or what we enjoy, some recreational things. So I wanted to ask, just a quick show of hands, how many people watch Netflix in here? Okay, almost everybody. How many people have Crave? Does anybody watch Game of Thrones in the room? Did anybody get Crave just because you wanted to watch Game of Thrones? Or is that just me? And also, Star Wars. Has anybody watched the new Star Wars? The newer ones? Not really? Who thinks the original trilogy is the only way to go? Okay, more show of hands. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of present that as just a fun exercise and think that that's kind of a community in itself. You can identify with those who share your same interests, share your same opinion. And it's the same with culture, it's the same with Indigenous knowledge, and we all relate to each other on that level. And so thank you for spending your time, and thank you for having us here. It's been an honor, and thank you for allowing us on your territory to share our information and share our story.
So good morning, everyone. Ōlelo. If that just goes up on the screen, that'd be great. So for those who do not know where I'm from, I live in Iqaluit, which is the capital city of Nunavut. It's situated on Baffin Island. I guess, is there a clicker? And sorry that I missed the end of yesterday. Where is my clicking to? Okay. Okay, so I understood I missed out on who was the furthest person, or who was the person who traveled the furthest. So I live way up there, and it is approximately, wrong direction, 7,000 kilometers away, and probably the most expensive ticket. So this is what my home looks like. It's in the Arctic. There are no trees. And we are, not surprisingly, like most of Canada's north, except for a few places, we are completely dependent on satellite. And even despite the federal government's consistent subsidies, it remains extremely expensive. So that just gives you an idea, $80 a month for 20 gigabytes. And where they screw you is on the overages. So that is very, very hard for many families to manage. As you can imagine, we have very high rates of poverty, and including even food insecurity, and people will prioritize connectivity even to be able to, sometimes skip meals, which is outrageous. We have a library in every community, and they have a community access program, which, it gets really well utilized. So even the most recent $50 million investment that our federal government made this year was to attempt to increase our speeds from 5 megabits to 15 megabits, 3 times faster, which is, sounds good on politically, except that when you actually look at what everyone else is getting elsewhere in the South, it is not good. And so there's a lot of what I would call spin that happens. And what we were not aware of, or we hadn't really paid enough attention, is where that money was going. So it was going to the CKA band, which meant that, yes, in some cases it can be 4 times faster the speed when it is perfect conditions. Well, it's not perfect conditions every day of the year. So you can imagine, when I was mayor up until about last Wednesday, one of the constant sort of like complaints and frustrations that I got from my community was the fact that, like this, a satellite dish might as well be a chip bowl at the party because, people are just so pissed off. So literally Northwest Tel is one of our major internet service providers, and they were finally coming out and explaining that, its degradation is due to rain. And here again, one of my community members basically saying that I haven't even come close to blowing my cap because that would involve the internet working properly. So that's, these are just fun little sort of things that I just wanted to add. Again, someone said yesterday is that the story or the public relations component is incredibly important. It helps politicians, it helps the telecommunications sector, Indigenous communities, explain the situation and to lobby. So again, most of the money actually goes to the satellite provider. So where I really want to get to, besides, the beginning of this PowerPoint slide, and you can't actually see that. That's me, not that long ago, probably about 10 days ago, trying to load my Twitter. And it took 17 minutes to go from the white screen to the blue screen. And so I couldn't even tweet how pissed off I was. There are a whole bunch of things that are happening in our country, in Canada, and including in our northern region. So most of you may be aware there's a race by a number of companies, both OneWeb, SpaceX, Amazon, and Telesat, to basically get the LEOs, the low Earth orbit satellites in. And why this is good for us is that it's expected to actually benefit the Arctic, possibly before anywhere else. I just checked with my sort of business partner and colleague, and Mike thinks that actually OneWeb or Amazon will likely beat the others, especially Telesat. Telesat is the one that is so far getting the most sort of federal government subsidy. So that's important. Why am I raising this? There's another future slide I'm going to speak to, is that we, or for myself, actually, for the last sort of 9 or 10 years, have been sort of, jumping up and down as a politician, as a community activist, trying to improve connectivity in my region and, speaking to others, because I'm not a tech person, that's not my background, but I know enough to sort of talk to people that know more than me and sort of say, what can we do? What solutions should we be putting forward to, our regional government and territorial government? Sorry, I should have changed that to white lettering so that it popped out. But one of the things that we created is an Arctic Internet Exchange Point non-governmental organization. Why? Because there's money specifically for NGOs, not for profits. We can access approximately 75 to 80% of sometimes the hardware costs for particular projects. So one of the projects that we want to work on is creating an Arctic Internet Exchange Point. So most of the IXPs, Internet Exchange Points, in Canada or North America are in large urban centers. We know that it is possible to get the right people to look at creating an IXP for communities of approximately 50,000, 25,000, 10,000. It just needs to get engineered. We've managed to assemble a sort of a number of people or companies and organizations that are keen to help us. So this includes Microsoft, includes CIRA, includes the Internet Society of Canada, includes different federal government departments, includes my Inuit organizations, it includes my territorial government. Everyone, recognizes and sees there's real value. Because right now, what happens is that, for us to connect and communicate with each other, everything is going up and then back down. There is literally no local traffic. Now, one of the stories I like to tell is my territorial government has approximately 5,000 computers, so over almost 2,500 employees. When they have to download their Microsoft software, it is a nightmare. And when there are updates, it is a nightmare. So the ability of creating at least Arctic Internet Exchange Point in Iqaluit, the capital city, will be tremendously useful because we can have a cache of, we download the content once to a local server, and then our governments and Inuit organizations and businesses can grab that information. The other thing that we've also said is we would love to store our cultural content on an Arctic Internet Exchange Point. Right now, and I think I shared this last year with Inuvik and in Santa Fe, is that we do, Inuit, produce content, but the internet is so crappy that you have to send the material down to Montreal or Toronto, edit it, and then upload it to servers in the South, and the rest of the world has better access to our cultural content than we do, which is bizarre. So this would be useful. Having our territorial governments' websites and our Inuit organizations' websites and content on the Internet Exchange Point will also benefit. We also, was part of one of the groups that had submitted an application. There had been a competition across Canada for $1 million prizes, $5 million prizes, $10 million prize for smart cities. So as a group and consortium, we put in a proposal basically to develop and implement sort of a range of different initiatives or projects that ultimately could improve health and wellness platforms on a digital platform to support positive mental health and reduce risk of suicide. We won $10 million because of it. So we were only one of 5 cities that won the prize, or regions, and so now we're having to sort of tweak that. Part of the reason why I think we won is that one of our partners had already begun to develop a makerspace, so a youth-focused program which is teaching our children digital skills and making apps. And so those are the kids. And in Iqaluit, thankfully, we actually have a space for them. It's full, because you've got to wire it up, and you don't want to sort of try to, bring everything in and take everything out every time another group needs it. So they're really hands-on. The kids love it. Someone said yesterday, and I totally agree, and I've been trying to push the group, is we also need to focus at the children who are most at risk or most marginalized. Because what tends to happen is that in our community, those children who have the most opportunities, the most benefits and access are the ones that are going and take advantage of these programs. This is one of the kids' apps, and it's so cute, and I wish, I'm not technically savvy enough to actually have uploaded the video, but what it is that's a kudluk, which is a stone traditional lamp, and an elder would usually light it, and so you take the little wick and you sort of spread it, and what they've done is that it's like, oh my God, the little drops of fire come down and you move your kudluk to catch the little fire to light up your kudluk. So it's so cool and so cute. I have no idea how they do it, but because these kids are probably much smarter than me. The other opportunity that's happening in my region is that, for years I had been lobbying hard to get Iqaluit a fiber optic cable. In 2010, when we had a telecom summit, literally I was pushing for fiber, and I had people in the room, including my senator, who was saying fiber optic is pie in the sky technology. And it's like, what? Are you kidding me? It's been around for decades. Oh, it's never been done in the Arctic. And there have been fiber to Nuuk already, and fiber up to Svalbard. And so sort of almost 9-10 years later, we finally got an announcement this year that our federal government is going to commit $150 million for the fiber optic cable, and our territorial government will kick in approximately $60 million more. My fear and my concern is the fact that maybe our territorial government IT folks, who are nice people, don't realize what a specialized and highly technical sector subsea fiber is. And so trying to, with my network, bring some of the folks to help them really understand how it can be done and should be done, so that we don't see it being a foobar, just and spending a lot more and making mistakes. Because if you make a $200 million mistake in our northern region, it can cost us future opportunities to go back and get more money, and it also costs or puts other northern region projects at risk. So it's really, really important to do it well. The region below us, Nunavut, is also actually building fiber up the Hudson Bay coast, and so one of the things I'm always doing is talking to everyone, trying to realize what's happening. And my region and that region weren't even talking to each other about, the technical issues required to one day connect the two cables to each other. And you have to do that early on, because there's everything from energy issues, but also the choice of design and equipment. So because one of the other sort of cables that had been built from Greenland, Nuuk, down to St. John's didn't have a branching unit to allow us to just, connect in. I just found out about a month ago when I was at a different conference. I thought it had been a design issue and they just hadn't thought about actually sort of putting a branching unit. And in the end, they said, yeah, actually we did design it with a branching unit, but we never actually installed the branching unit, and the branching unit equipment, is sitting in some closet in someone's office. And I was like, are you kidding me? I was so pissed off to find out that, because I had just thought it had been an oversight. It actually had been a choice. Another, opportunity that's come into my community, in which we're going to jump on, is that Iridium has decided to sell their site. And so my sort of partners are looking at putting in a proposal because this would be perfect for our Arctic Internet Exchange Point. It would be good for the fiber optic cable. It would be good for a variety of different, sort of a hub. It's not that far from the shoreline. It's probably about not even half a kilometer to the shore and about half a kilometer to downtown. So we're going to apply for some federal money. Hopefully we get about 75 to 80% of it. We've got to do the business case and the model to make sure that it's sustainable, which I think, it will be, because I've been talking to different levels of government. So in all, to end, is that when someone asked yesterday in our group, how do you as a community begin to develop some sort of initiatives or projects or group? Well, even starting off with a few dedicated, involved people who go, this cannot work. This is not working. I can't take this anymore. I must be able to channel my anger, my frustration, my downtime where I'm not able to connect to actually work on figuring out how do we do this better. And so it's been, kind of not, I would say, a side project for quite some time, because it's been sort of continuous learning. What are the funding opportunities? Who else is out there? Who's prepared to help? And just, that using that network, expanding that network, selling everyone, to come on board and to help make us connect better. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Kwe mandalo tio, nindelo siya Sahamo, Leroy, Denny, Leia Migimagi, Eskasoni, Olga si aim giskoga Hawaiʻi, Jukoya Hagelnog, Antus Bekisoka, Linnea. It's an honor for me to be here in our native Hawaii island, a sacred island, and along here with my daughter, Linnea. My name is Chief Leroy Denny. I'm a chief from Eskasoni First Nation. And just give me a second here. And I'm from Mi'kmaq territory, northeast of the Atlantic Ocean in the Mi'kmaq territory, which is north of Canada, in Nova Scotia. And Eskasoni is the largest Mi'kmaq community of all in all of Mi'kmaq territory. So you guys hear me good back there? So it's an honor, and just in protocol, I just want to acknowledge the elders and the prayers and the songs this morning. I want to acknowledge that, and I want to acknowledge that I'm able to speak here, along with my daughter here, to here a native Hawaii island, in the sacred island. And yesterday we had an opportunity to visit that protest site at Mauna Kea, and it certainly was an honor. We were greeted by the elders, and certainly an honor to. I stand with solidarity with them over there, and they honored me with a song and prayer and dance, and it just very, very moving, very humbling. So that I just want to acknowledge, and I just want to acknowledge for the invitation I got here today and the prayer this morning. I want to say ōlelo, thank you. As chief of Eskasoni, I've been chief for over 10 years now, and my grandfather was chief, and I'm elected. We have an elected system here back home in Eskasoni, in Canada, in Mi'kmaq territory. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing. And I want to apologize as well. I was supposed to speak yesterday. I wasn't sure. Last I knew, I was supposed to speak today, and I didn't really look at the agenda. So I'm glad, but I'm here. I'm here today, this morning, and able to speak. And I was asked to speak about connectivity, speak about their language and our education system. And I'll touch on that stuff, and I'm going to show you some things. And so I'm going to tell you about our language journey, our commitment, awakening, and revitalization, which is very important today. Oh. Down button, okay. So again, I'm from Eskasoni, we call it. In my language, it means Eskasoni. And I'm also chair of Mi'kmaq Ginamatnoi, means Mi'kmaq Education. So under Mi'kmaq, we call it MK, it's simple for everybody. Under MK, I've been chair for over 10 years now. And it means, in this organization, MK, we control our own education. The government is our self-government from our original title and treaties. We have a right to self-government. So we use that right for self-government as Indigenous people, and we took control of our education system. Because the system we were following, from the government system, it was failing us. It was failing our people. Only less than 30% of people, the kids, the graduation rate was only 30%. Ever since MK started 20 years ago, actually 15 years ago, I think 20 years ago it started, 1999 was in full effect. That's when our graduation rate started to rise. Today, it's the highest in the country at 96% graduation rate. That's how far we came. And I used to be a band counselor, a councilman, before I was chief. And I used to be a teacher. I graduated from St. FX University. Any Canadians here? Raise your hand for Canadian. Oh, okay. Okay, I don't feel like a stranger now. Hey. Any Indigenous First Nations people here? Oh, nice. So from United States or Canada? Canada? Okay. So that's awesome. From Mi'kmaq territory. Mi'kmaq, I don't know if you're familiar with the area. So it's good to see you here. And so yes, I was saying I was also a teacher. My first few years, I was a grade 8 teacher. I never planned on being a teacher at all. It's just back then, there wasn't much opportunities if you live in a reservation. There's not that much opportunities. So, but I was doing good in university, and I figured if I go teaching, I'll guarantee a job. So that's what I did. At that time, MK was introduced. We were told, we have a new government system now. We have a new control for education. There's going to be lots of jobs. You should get into education, and because they want all Mi'kmaq, they want Mi'kmaq speakers. I'm also a fluent Mi'kmaq speaker. I speak. I probably first few years of my life I didn't speak English at all, and that's why they failed me in grade 1 because I didn't have a clue what the teacher was saying. It was like I don't know if you're familiar with Charlie Brown when teachers talking, like wonk wonk wonk. That's how the teacher sounded to me. So and we had our own school, but it was a provincial school, and up to grade 9 it was just my environment. When I mean my environment, like the people around me, my neighborhood, everybody spoke Mi'kmaq. In the school, the bus drivers, everybody spoke Mi'kmaq to each other. And we didn't really speak English, and if you try to speak English and somebody will laugh at you, you'll make a mistake and poke fun at them, right? Only time we spoke English was probably to the teacher. It was mostly, majority of them were non-Indigenous teachers. So in the 80s, our Mi'kmaq language was very strong in my community. It was a very fluent community. My community is over 4,500 people now. Back then, it was like around 3,500, 3,000 people. So I became a teacher, taught grade 8, I struggled with it. And finally, they moved me to Mi'kmaq language. So I was a Mi'kmaq language teacher for a couple of years. And then I became a band counselor at the time, so I left teaching to become a full-time band counselor. But I picked up the job at the MK, where I'm a chairman now. But that time, I became a ICT coordinator. And I never went to school for computers, for any technology, but my position sounded very smart and intelligent, while the IT people here. So I picked up the job, but this job told me, okay, we're going to develop a lesson plan, curriculum that promotes our Mi'kmaq language and culture using whatever you have in our schools, connectivity, internet. So develop that curriculum to promote our language. That's your job. I was like, okay. I was a dancer all my life. I do a ceremony. I do lots of sweats. And my daughter there knows, probably almost every night I go to a sweat lodge almost every night. And that's my medicine. I have to have a ceremony. I have to pray in my language and have to have a connection to the Mother Earth and to directions. And I just have to. It's who I am. I was raised. And so yeah, I used that opportunity in the ICT curriculum and developed a curriculum how promote our language and culture within connectivity. So I'm just going to speak on that. Again, this is my community here. If you go up the mountain, and I was telling Kelly, I was telling her how Cape Breton Island, we call Unamagi, land of the fog, and how our island became #1 island destination in Canada. I think it was #3 in the world. I assume maybe Hawaii is up there somewhere, 1 or 2. So beautiful here. I'm just jaw-dropping view here. So we have in my community, it's a fluent community, and it's just a portion of my community there from the top of the mountain. It's a fluent community. But today, we're starting having difficulty. We start facing issues amongst our young people are not speaking the language anymore, and our language is in jeopardy right now. Not just Mi'kmaq, all indigenous languages in the country. They're in jeopardy. And our elders teach us, if we lose our language, we're going to lose everything else. Language is the core in our culture. It's the ultimate. It's everything. We lose that, everything else is going to come with it. Very, very important, very crucial. If we're told you're going to lose your language, and if that's gone, that's it for us. And so we really have to stand together as indigenous people to fight back, revitalize our language through education, through connectivity. And they say, why is the language being affected? What's wrong with the young people? Well, the technology, they blame technology. And we're all technical people here. Okay, and the technology should help our language. It should be more easy to educate our young people with the language. Well, yeah, the young people, they're saying this is facts and stats, right? The studies were done. They're not conversing much anymore. They're listening to too much music. They're on their iPhones, they're on their iPads. Kids are not talking to their mothers or fathers. They're on their apps and they're watching too many movies, and they're just the world is just fast and overwhelmed. All the information they're getting are about our young people. But we can also develop information, apps, videos, and writing from very easy to develop these apps. So we've been doing that in MK, and we see a lot of big difference now. So and I'm just going to speak on that. We also have in Eskasoni, we have excuse me, my notes are in here, guys. There was a latest study done in my community. Eskasoni is it's a fluent, it's a stronghold of in all of Mi'kmaq Nation. But after our study was done, our doesn't really look really good in the stats, that our language is declining So majority of the elders are speaking the language. People my age, 25 to, let's say, 50, is the, more than 50% speak, and only 30% young people are speaking. If nothing's been done, if nothing's been changed, my generation, only 40% of the elders will be speaking. The mid-age will be like 30%, and only 10% will be young people. These young people will become elders in the future, and only 10% of the elders will speak if nothing's done, nothing's changed. So we're going all out on our young people, the kids. We opened up our all-immersion school, and our school board said, okay, we're going to open up an all-immersion school. So I'm game for it, let's do it, and we did. And I said, no English allowed in this school, okay? And as I was told about the story, she didn't allow any English allowed in her culture. Very firm, very strong with that. So that's what we did. We're going to be very strong. We're going to make all immersion school. When you enter the school, no English allowed. Bus drivers, starting when the kids are getting picked up, and janitors, everybody in the school, in the playground, we had to create an environment. So that's what we did. But before that, we had an immersion program, and at our big school, we have over 1,100 students. And we had an immersion program there, which was working really well. And we studied these children at the immersion school. And the cool thing about this, if you teach our kids our language, it comes with culture, it comes with respect, it comes with protocol. And these kids in the immersion program, we're getting, and there was a transition in grade 4, grade 5 to start learning English then. According to the studies, these kids had higher reading levels. They were better in math, their comprehension, they were respectful, their behavior, like everything came with it. Not just speaking the language, everything came with it. Most of them, majority of them, the graduation rate, they all graduated, they all became nurses. Some of them went to medical school, they all became professionals, and they're coming back to the community, and they speak the language. We have so many nurses now who speak Mi'kmaq, and teachers. 70% of our teachers in our school in Eskasoni are all Mi'kmaq, and they're all speakers. And when I started, it was only like probably 10% Mi'kmaq teachers, right? And mostly these teachers were like teacher aides, and they weren't like full like teachers, right? Today, along with myself, I was a teacher at the time. A bunch of us went to school, so that change has been happening. We have a language steering committee in my community. Elders, all the professionals. We have elders there who write curriculums. So we come together and create these events in our community. We made Mi'kmaq language fun. We include our elders, youth, young people. We had a ball team that went to Alberta for a tournament, and they were Mi'kmaq speakers on the team, and they're all talking in Mi'kmaq, going all over the place, and actually in Saskatchewan. And there was a big native fastball tournament there, and they couldn't believe it. Our team spoke Mi'kmaq and on the field, and we were like code talkers and stuff like that. So they were just overwhelmed. So you see at the top over there, that's our elders conference. We have language conferences in our community. We steadily have those conferences. So because we just can't put the burden on a child. Okay, we're going to teach children our language, and the child shouldn't carry the burden to save our language. It has to be all of us. It has to be from elders to parents, whoever's responsible in the community. And we all have that responsibility to protect the language. So it's important as a community, from the leadership, from all the professionals, all the employees we have. I have over 750 employees under my band. So language is very, very important. You got to utilize it in the offices and everywhere, from the health centers. So when I go, we have a new health center. Everything's written in Mi'kmaq. you're greeted in Mi'kmaq. They answer the phone in Mi'kmaq. So it's important. I was also involved on Chiefs Committee on Indigenous Languages at the AFN level, Assembly of First Nations, and we were involved with the new Indigenous Language Act. And I know that we have a new Prime Minister now, and once the government starts, this new Indigenous Language Act will start, which is over $700 million invested. So that's a good news for connectivity for internet, for that, just for your information. I'll give you an example what my high school doing, the youth in our high school doing. I'm going to show you a clip of this video. I won't play this whole thing because I only have some time. So if you want to play my Unamagi, my Keeperton. Unamagi means Keeperton. That's one of our districts. That's my territory, Unamagi, our sacred island. It's a beautiful island and beautiful, same as Hawaii. So if you want to play that real quick, I won't play the whole song. And what the students did was, they, because of the connectivity grants we're getting, we received equipment. We received recording. So the youth were making their own videos and they recording their own songs. So this is Emma Stevens and sitting with the elders and elders. There's a big connection between elders and the youth as well in our schools. Elders are welcome in our schools all the time. Is there a song for that? So we have music, and we love music back home. Instruments, because Cape Breton, there's a lot of fiddling, so we have fiddling. So these are the students who made the video, and they made the song, and they sing it in our language. Do you guys recognize, anybody recognize Emma Stevens? No? That's the young lady. Do you recognize her? Okay, I'll show you the next video why she's recognizable and what she's doing to promote the language through music. That's important. Through technology, through the equipment we're getting. So I'll just go wait for the part she sings in Mi'kmaq. Wedabexi means I'm from, this is my territory. This is my Unamagi. So we have a place called Goat Island in Eskasoni, and it's a Eskasoni Cultural Journeys. Tour buses coming in to Cape Breton all the time. Like here you guys have cruise ships. We're getting cruise ships as well, and they come to Eskasoni and they get to experience Mi'kmaq language, food, and music. So, okay, do you want to play the next video? This next video as well. Blackbird. It has over 1.1 million views. Emma Stevens. And she had a call out from Paul McCartney. She actually met Paul McCartney. She translated the song Blackbird. It's beautiful. It's an honor for us hearing our Mi'kmaq language being shared and viewed all over the world. You know, and it's an honor. And they said, if you speak your language, you won't get anywhere. We were getting that. If you speak your language, you have to learn English. You have to learn Western, and your language won't take you anywhere. Like they were talked down on that. Parents were getting worried. If I continue teaching my child this language, they're not going to get far. They're going to become one of the statistics in the indigenous communities. They're going to become suicidal. They're going to become. They're going to be on welfare. You know these things will happen. So a lot of parents in the studies we found out, they want to teach their kids just to speak English, so they'll do better in school. That wasn't the case. According to our studies, if you teach your child the language, better chance they will succeed more. They'll be more respectful. They'll be good community people, and language will save them. So, of course, your language will take you places. Emma's so famous back home right now. Her song, she's been performing everywhere, you know. And she met Paul McCartney, and she got a call out from the Prime Minister, and it's amazing. And from the grants we received, from the recording systems, from involving music, involving learning about making videos, recordings in our classrooms. It's really important. Look how far these students, and these students made this one. They're the ones who made the song. They're the ones, they didn't make the song, but they translate the song and also involve in music in the curriculum as well. And technology, they work hand in hand, especially the videos today. Okay, I'm gonna play the next one. Go back to my slide. Okay. Oh.
Thank you.
I'm trying to click.
Thank you for coming here tonight.
Oh, there's another, that's something else playing.
This next song is...
Okay. Right now. Migima Ganamad, as I mentioned, recent events, app development. We have apps. Remember I was saying they're blaming kids to they're on their, you know, if you see 3-year-old, 4-year-old on their iPad all the time, on a plane or whatever, right? We see that on their phone, right? Why don't we develop app for them? Develop these apps. So we developed. We developed over 40 apps on our phone, and so they're language apps, there's stories, there's everything's on there, and we just put Mi'kmaq language on iTunes or Google Play. Everything's on there, and the government's starting to use it, and like everybody uses it, right? And it's free, and thanks to Google and Apple for sponsoring that and working together with them, especially developing these apps. And I see one of them, Google's one of the sponsors. So we work with other companies as well to help. And we developed these apps. MK, the staff, developed these apps. We learned first, it took us a couple of years, so we learned it. Almost done? Okay. I did the video conferencing. When I start working, I didn't know what to do. I was just told, you're going to do this, you're going to connect. So under the video conferences, we have connection in all Indigenous schools in Canada have video conferencing, all the schools. So I took that opportunity. And we developed a curriculum, 1 hour, or 40 minutes, to speak on anything, promoting language and culture through video concerts. We had a national Indigenous language Christmas concert right across, different Cree, Mohawk, Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, you know, right across. We're singing Christmas songs, so it was really nice. Accessible on unit, phone, any smart device, and events on video conferencing. And I went to Shashashi, north of Newfoundland, Labrador. I developed their, I installed their video conference over there. They were just getting the new connectivity. That was only 10 years ago. They didn't have any internet connection over there. But now today in Eskasoni, we have fiber up now that connected to all the schools, and we're using that opportunity for high-speed internet. Oral languages is a foundation for literacy. Language is important, holistic assessment, child, caregiver, elder, teacher, 360 view of a child developed by Mi'kmaq. And they call this, for the younger children, they call it play and learn and play. In order for teach a child language, you have to play with them. And that way, with what do you call your teacher. I'm going to play that quick video, just a couple seconds there. just you'll have a sense, and you can just write that down. We developed these.
The core of any nation is its ability to communicate amongst its people and communicate within its first language. For us, it's Mi'kmaq. Mi'kmaq language is unique to our people, and it's something that we have to preserve.
The language is our culture.
I have
If
to
we don't
guys.
have language, we lose so much.
You can just turn it off. Well, I'll share this stuff, okay? I'll share my presentation to everybody.
Learn the language. If we
I'm
lose
going
it
to exit
now,
that.
it's
I just
gone.
want to
I think oral
end my
language
presentation.
is really important.
I know you guys have some
earlier.
questions.
It's how you get.
Okay. We also had concerts. We developed a CD for all the students. All the songs are in Mi'kmaq, and there's YouTube over there, and it's to revitalize our language through song and technology, and they've been getting award nominations for doing this, including Emma, and they write in original songs. There's a love song, and I think that's the last part, is it? Can you play that first YouTube video there? I think it's a... No, not that one. The second one. The second one, yeah. This lady here, her name is Galolin Johnson. She wrote a love song. I think she wrote a song for her boyfriend, how in love she is. Beautiful love song. It's a beautiful love song, and it's all in my language. She's a fluent speaker. She's she went through the immersion school. She's one of the graduates. She's in university, doing really good, and she's still writing songs in Mi'kmaq. It's beautiful, and we hear it. Okay. I think I missed part of the presentation there. Just want to end. Looking ahead, language is stronger. More music, more resources, improve accessibility, podcasts, videos, adult immersion that we're interested to develop, documenting our elders project, land-based learning, community reclamation, not just schools. There's a part there I missed. Oh, this one here for the apps. And we have over 40 apps twice a year, and over 3,000 downloads. So yeah, it's all free. So that's my presentation, guys, and I'll take some questions if there's time. Any questions? Don't be shy, okay? Language is a big investment. I say probably for under MK, which is 13 bands, 12 bands, probably we invest over $1 million. And it's from the government grants, right? We control that money, over $1 million, right? And from these developments. And that's why it's really important, this language. And I think there's over $600 million. From Canada, it's a really important opportunity to apply those dollars, which will be available to revitalize the language. Any questions? No? Any more questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Tatsmewi. It is still morning, so at home it isn't. It's afternoon, so we say tatsalach, but today is tatsmewi, and I'm going to try to take our education piece and flip it a little bit. We've talked a lot about language this morning and language immersion. We've heard a lot about that while we've been here in this beautiful facility on this beautiful island. But I want to talk a little bit about how our youth have interests that may be taking them in a direction that we're not really prepared as tribes or as nations to address. How do we help them get to where they want to go? So we take, at the Nez Perce tribe in north central Idaho, U.S., we take 7th and 8th graders, and I have about 4 a year that come in, and they come in during their free study class or their free period, and they'll come in for mathematics or for to use social sciences or natural resources. So whatever their field of study is and however they think technology can help them, we take them in the 7th and 8th grade class. So we have them for a full school year. And then during their breaks, they come in for an extended session with us. Beyond that, we take the high schoolers and we'll have a career, it's like a following. So you have somebody that comes in, you could have them for a whole year, you could have them only for a semester, but they come in and work with you and they do a job shadow. So every one of my technicians is assigned somebody, either a 7th and 8th grader or if they are working in the field, if they're working on our towers or if they're doing any network engineering, then it's the older children in high school. But what we found is the majority of children coming in think they're going to have a gaming career, right? But they don't really know what that means. They're whatever game they're playing, Xbox, PlayStation, online games, whatever games they're playing, they think, I'm going to be a professional gamer because that's a real career today. So somebody said yesterday and even this morning, it's I'm good at the reality check, right? So I bring these students in and we go into our conference room and we have all this great food and we're sitting there talking and I only spend maybe 15 minutes out of the whole school year with them, and I'll tell them, so you want to be a gamer, but what does that mean? Are you going to be a programmer? Are you going to be a developer? Are you going to be the person that's selling the game? Are you going to be the graphics designer? What are you in the gaming world and how are you going to be there? Are you the person playing the game? And if you are, how do you get on a team? And who are your heroes and how did they get there? And what type of education did it take for them to get to that place? So those are all the things we go through. And then we bring their, oh no, I just want to be the player. I'm the player. And I want to get on a team and I already have a YouTube following and I'm already playing the game and I'm doing all these instructional videos. I say, yeah, how many of them are paying you? How many of them are subscribing to you? Because at some point somebody has to buy the toilet paper that wipes your butt. Somebody's paying for the internet. Somebody's paying for the computer that you're using and somebody's paying for the subscription. Let's be real here. Where we have to be in a world where it's inclusive of everything that you're doing. So these students don't typically think of that. And it's a whole world, right? You have a whole, you can't go into your high school years thinking, I'm going to be a professional gamer and I'm just going to be able to live on somebody's couch and I'm just going to be able to play games for the rest of my life. That could happen. Yeah, absolutely. But at some point, somebody's going to want help with rent. Somebody's going to want help with the internet. You need laundry detergent. You need shampoo. So we go through all of these things. Okay, let's make a budget. What are you going to live on? How are you going to live on it? So then we're tying in the financials. We're tying in how are they going to support themselves while they become this professional gamer. So it opens a world that they don't typically think about, and it makes our students understand that there's something more than what they originally thought they were going to do for the rest of their life. And it brings in real life skills. Our high school students that are coming to us, some of them say, well, really what I want to do is I just want to work in fisheries resource and I'm going to become a biologist and I don't really need this technology. Well, absolutely you need that technology. It's going to drive everything you do in fish restoration and in species protection. Data collection, sensors. So how are you going to use that data? How are you going to collect that data? And how are you going to analyze that data? And then once you know what that sensor is, how do you control that sensor? Where are you going to get your internet from? Where's the source coming from? So then you have to take that student and open that door and show them in your career path, even if you don't think it involves technology, it absolutely does. We have timber scalers now who are using drones. They're not going out on the ground and doing 250-mile hikes, staying out for 7 days. They're using drones and they go out on a day basis. They drive out to a location and they're using drones to do all their timber scaling. That used to be a physical manual job that people would have to go walk and mark and do timber assessments for harvest. So all of that has been changing with technology. And students have to know what that change is bringing to their world and to their chosen career path. And are we prepared as Native nations to address that change? Well, we had a student come in and say, I'm going to end up in graphics arts and I'm going to be developing all of these great designs, and I want to be able to do a 3D printer. So I told the person that was assigned to that student, buy a 3D printer. Lowest end you can purchase, that's commercial grade, and let's see. Well, when we got the 3D printer in, oh my gosh, the amount of coding, right? So now that's a whole new level. You open a new door. Yeah, they wanted to be a graphics arts designer. They wanted to be a developer, but how are they going to take that to the next step, and how are they going to market that? So you have to think about what is technology's tool to help these students get to their next level. We have individuals who go into the technology field thinking, I'm not going to have to deal with people. I'm going to be able to be in my room, and I'm going to be able to do my thing, and I'm not going to have to develop my personal skills. And that's not true either. For the rest of your life in technology, you're serving somebody else. It's never about you. You're developing for somebody, you're working for somebody, you're servicing something for somebody. Technology all by itself does nothing. It's what the humans are doing with it that make it valuable. And so people who think they're going into technology and they don't have to deal with any other person, that isn't true. So we have to burst that bubble too. You're going into technology, then you absolutely have to know how to deal with people, and what does that mean? So these students are with us for a whole year. At the end of the year, they do a presentation to our community and to their school, to their peers. It's them getting up speaking. It's them talking about what they learned and how they were able to apply what they did in their position with us. So flip that now. Some of them have gone to college, and now they're coming back and saying, what can I do to work in my community? Well, Nez Perce Tribe developed a large wireless infrastructure, microwave, and we operate as a WISP. So I need people installing equipment at homes. I need people training people how to use the equipment in that home. We need tower climbers. We need network engineers. We need frequency engineers. So when they're going to school and they're coming back to us for all of their college breaks and their school breaks, they can come back and I'll pay them as an intern to come work for me, so that they have an opportunity to develop whatever they're learning and put that knowledge right to use. So I'm not having to pay an engineer who don't even live in my state to do my network design and to ensure that what I'm doing is going to work. I can now rely on a student who's learning hands-on at a university to do this for us. So our ability as nations to envision something, listening to what our youth want to do, and then helping them get there is really responsibility of your technology departments within your organizations. So whether it's your clinic doing health records, or I work on the tribal government side, doing the purchasing of computer equipment or installation or support or whatever it may be, networking. So it's our responsibility to say to these children who might have some sort of an interest, this is what we do. Well, a big piece that's missing is partnership development. A big piece that's missing when people go into technology is that I don't have to worry about what my state is doing or what the telco is doing or what my county is doing. That isn't true. It is all interconnected, and that development of partnerships is really what's going to take you from what you have today to what's better. And every time you need to do something better, you have a new partner, or you have to develop that partner, a extended partnership. So if you want higher bandwidth, I can't do it alone. Yeah, I can throw fiber in the ground all day long, but if I don't have a connection point, it's worthless. It's just something in the ground, right? It has to connect to something. So that's where your partnerships are absolutely critical. And in any partnership, you're going to have likes and dislikes. I always equate it to a marriage, right? I love my husband. All day long, I love my husband. But there are little things that drive me absolutely crazy. And so there's things we don't do together. We harvest wood for our own sweat and for our house, but we can't stack wood together. Oh, like heck, if I'm going to go to the wood house and stack wood with him because what he's going to do and what I'm going to do is going to be completely different. We don't build fence together for our horses. When we're putting in pasture, it drives me nuts. Okay, so that's a relationship, right? In every relationship, you have things that you love and things that you don't really like. Doesn't mean it's going to break the relationship. It means you have to learn how to work around those things and how to learn how to build that partnership. My partners, throughout all of our infrastructure builds, have been across the gamut. Some of them took 8 years. The state of Idaho took me 8 years to get an easement agreement to work with our state. That's a long time. That's a long fight. And do you still want to be that person's partner? Well, in this case, it's an absolute necessity. Our reservation is a checkerboard reservation, and while I might not like it, in 8 years we developed a relationship, a partnership that's going to serve us both, and it's going to serve my community. So yes, absolutely, you work with what you're dealt. I have many partnerships with federal partners, funding agencies, policy regulators. Federal partners across the board have been a necessity to do what I do. And by and large, the individuals that are in those positions are doing the job that they're hired to do. I'm doing the job that I'm hired to do. And how do we work together to make what I need for my people work, right? So partnerships all across the board are absolutely necessary. When people go into technology, they don't necessarily think that that's something they have to develop. It is absolutely something you have to develop. Getting your individuals to understand that what I say to this person needs to be the same accurate, correct information that I'm giving this person, because at some point it's going to come back and bite in the butt. So you want to make sure that information that you're, I always call it spewing, right? I'm up here on the platform spewing to you. The information that I'm giving you is accurate, it's correct, and it's reliable, and that our relationship isn't going to be damaged or isn't going to flounder because of something that I did or didn't do. Truly is partners. Now, you bring in your corporate partners, you bring in your investors, you bring in interested individuals. In North Central Idaho, we do have a large population that is very difficult to work with because I'm a person of color, number one, and number two, because I'm a woman. So that was the community we tackled first. When I knew it was going to be the most difficult community, I knew that that was going to be, people don't get reelected because they're working with the tribe. I mean, it was a significant problem. Recently, I was in Albuquerque for National Congress of American Indians, and I went in only for the FCC training on Sunday. The gentleman that was helping me was a veteran. He volunteers, he don't work, he volunteers at the airport. He's the nicest man I ever met. I thanked him for his service. I thanked him for his assistance. So he stands there and he's visiting me and he tells me, oh yeah, I heard about North Central Idaho. There's some community up there that's built by former military and so he's going on and on about how this would be a great community. He said, what do you think about that? I said, well, I personally don't ever go there because number one, I'm a person of color, and number two, I'm a female, so I don't ever go to that community. And to see the look on this elderly gentleman's face was astonishing. He hadn't ever thought of that. He's like, oh, I never even considered why there was no people of color in that community. Well, there's a purpose. That's how they built the community. Those are the communities we tackle first. Those are the communities, that's the bridge we have to build first. That most difficult step is the step, once you overcome it, you have a win in your pocket that you can sell every day. Not only are they recognizing that you as an Indigenous person exist, but that they're 100% reliant on you for their services. We're giving them their broadband, we're giving them their high-speed internet access, we're giving them all of their support services. Every single month, they write me a check. That's a win. I'm so happy to get that check. At the end of the year, that's the very first thing I put in my report to my tribal nation is, this is how much we got from them. Those are the wins. Those are the wins that you want in your back pocket to say, if I can do it for this community, why can't I do it for my own people Let's get over our own. It isn't us against you, it's us together. Our reservation is split. We, in our own language, we talk about our upriver, our midriver, and our downriver. Well, that's turned into categories of prejudices that we hold against ourselves. We have to get over those. We have to get over those barriers. It isn't them against us. We're all one nation. We all share the same enrollment database. We all share the same government. We're one nation. And so what I'm doing for my people benefits the entire community around us. It isn't just the tribe who benefits, it's the entire region who benefits. So when we're thinking about networks and when we're thinking about technology on our nations, it goes from the children that we heard about today and language preservation, but beyond that, it's their own interests, right? What are they interested in? How do we keep them interested and how we develop that interest? 2, how do we work with our nations to increase what we have for our own people while building a revenue source and an opportunity to increase our infrastructure? And what does that mean? Well, ultimately, if I can get high enough bandwidth on my reservation, I hope to be a service center. I mean, truly, that's where I want to take it. I want to be able to say to any corporation in the U.S., whatever you're doing offshores in a third world country, you can do on an Perce reservation, and you can do it with the same tax breaks and the same tax benefits. And I have the high-speed connection. I have the land. You tell me. I have the employment base. So you tell me, what size service center do you need? What size call center do you need? I'll build it. We'll build it. We can make this happen together. And then I have employment, and I can keep my people at home where they want to be. And so we're not seeing a brain drain of people leaving our reservation to go find employment. No, the employment's right here, and we're bringing that corporation to us, to our lands, and we're helping our people. And it starts with high-speed connectivity, and it starts with the education from our youth to our college graduates, bringing them back into our own reservation land, saying, I need somebody who is an engineer. I need somebody who's a coder. I need somebody who's a programmer. So let's work that out and figure out how we're going to get there together. And partnerships is really where it starts. I can't do it alone. I need a partner. Thank you.
So first of all, just like to acknowledge the ancestral territories, the sovereign territories of the Hawaiian people that we're gathered on here today. My name's Denise Williams. I'm from Cowichan Tribes, Vancouver, British Columbia, unceded territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people. And I'm the CEO of the First Nations Technology Council. I identify more as a systems change entrepreneur, social innovation philosopher, general shit disturber. What we do at the Technology Council is we think about in British Columbia how to create change for Indigenous peoples throughout our province. We have 203 First Nations communities. We have over 250,000 Indigenous people in our province, and they are all independent. And so what we need to do as the First Nations Technology Council is build theories of change and logic models that help our people get from where we are now, which is underserved, not a lot of access, not affordable, nobody paying attention, poor data being collected, and all kinds of efforts to get our people into the tech and innovation economy to fill jobs, even though those programs and those systems are not designed by us, they're not for us. So what our logic models and what our theory of change is all about is putting in place the initiatives that need to be designed by us to ensure that we're not only competitive in BC's tech and innovation economy, but we're leading the growth of local, nation-built digital economies, and that we have a seat at the table in the co-creation of what the internet looks like, what online spaces mean, and to ensure that Indigenous voices are heard throughout the world. And this is always embarrassing when you're the CEO of the Tech Council and you don't know how to make the slide change. So thank you. So this is a little bit about our mandate. We serve at the pleasure of the 203 nations, as I mentioned. That is the BC Assembly of First Nations, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, and the First Nations Summit. We consider ourselves a provincial convener. What doesn't exist without us in the province is a way to gather community partners, so Indigenous-led organizations that are also looking at skills development, employment development, health, education, justice, all of the different natural resource sector companies, all of the industry partners in the province of BC in the tech and innovation sector, all of our government partners, and all of the academic institutions. So what we've been able to do, one of our major interventions that we've made in British Columbia, is to raise now about $15 million for the development of digital skills development for people in British Columbia. If anyone is interested in that curriculum or how we did that, or if we can make that be of service to you and your nation, we're happy to do that. The point of the curriculum, it's decolonized, it's indigenized, and it's localized. So what we believe is that tech-based learning has to be contextual for Indigenous people where they are. So the legwork should not be for First Nations people to figure out how to make that work in their nation. So that's the best practice that we've driven, and that's what we have designed. We have an 86% completion rate, I think, as a result of that. And 95% of our program funding does go directly to communities, which I always like to mention because that number is really high. Our little organization runs off the fumes of those grants. So these are the different career paths that we've set up. Foundations and Futures in Innovation and Technology is the name of the program. It is meant to have individuals go through all of these different opportunities in the BC tech and innovation economy, have them be competitive. But like I say, it's not just about Indigenous people going into the mainstream economy. It's about them bringing those skills back to grow local digital economies as well. So don't need to go through all of this, but the tech and innovation sector is the fastest growing in Canada. We want our people to represent more than the current 1% that's currently there. We know that the future of work is going digital. That goes without saying. These are the different areas that we're thinking about building skills for Indigenous people in British Columbia in. One of our issues is that fewer than 25% of our First Nations communities, remembering there's 203, meet the standard of broadband connectivity. And so what we're trying to do is build Canada's first Indigenous framework for innovation and technology. Currently, this is what's happening. In my 7 years at the First Nations Technology Council, I've seen literally hundreds of millions of dollars flow around Canada that are meant to improve connectivity to First Nations communities, improve the employment of Indigenous people in the sector and across sectors, and none of that funding actually makes it in any kind of impactful way to our nations. That's my own personal opinion. Part of the reason is there's not a framework in place, there's not a unified strategy to make that happen. So nations are trying to put in proposals for projects that only create a small amount of impact. So what we need to do is coordinate. And so this is what we have built. This is still conceptual. You see in the middle of this wheel, everything's community driven. That white piece around the edge, next to community driven vision, is the First Nation Technology Council's role in creating that change. And what we're trying to do is address the advancement of Indigenous people in tech and innovation through enhancing policy and legislation. We're thinking about things like spectrum sovereignty, like everyone else, governance and self-determination, connectivity infrastructure, tech and innovation leadership, employment and business development, and skills development. Recognizing, again, that it's a theory of change, we see that it's not just the how, it's the why, and we believe that Indigenous people have to determine what we're going to do with technology when it gets to us, and we need to do that now. I'll leave it there.
About 3 months after the Connect America Fund regulations were released. And there were dozens of questions in that notice of proposed rulemaking. And we baptized young Mr. Brian Howard into telecom policy, and he arose as an expert and has gone much farther than even those of us expected. So, Brian Howard.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Jeff.
Skuk the Muyajik on Nunavut, Sasapa Nikuth, Sapa and Thakamnoi. Anya Abchegik Brian Howard, Anya Dakmaradam, Donadam Gami Pipash, Anya Advaika of Asmam Gami Gak, Ayadak. Anya Amki Kamaki Quiva Akama Jividamia, Siasam Nyodet Nadwakak, Siasam Nyodet Api, Mavasapatash Josh, Mavasapa Etatash, Dovupan Yopan Jivia. So as Jeff had mentioned, my name is Brian Howard. Akamaradam, Donadam, and Pipash from the Gila River Indian community located in Arizona. I am a research and policy analyst with the American Indian Policy Institute at Arizona State University. It's a mouthful. I'm still trying to get used to that. But I've been there for 3 years now. I came on board. Oh, did I cut out? Okay. I came on board with AIPI back in August 2016 after I had left the NCAI, National Congress of American Indians, for over 5.5 years as a legislative associate working on telecommunications issues around protection of NAGPRA issues, financial literacy, and Native AA contracting. So just a little bit of background on an institute before I get into the findings of our report. The institute was founded at ASU back in 2006 as to be a Native American kind of research think tank. We were primarily founded by local community leaders within the state of Arizona, but also tribal faculty and tribal professionals that worked within Arizona State University. So our core areas are in applied research, policy analysis, capacity building and training. We do have a couple of workshops that we do offer tribes, specifically with the Tribal Financial Manager Certificate Program that teaches general accounting principles for those working within tribal governments. We also act as a facilitator for tribes within the state of Arizona to access the resources that the university has to offer. One of the core missions for Arizona State University is this idea of community embeddedness. So our university exists as in a way of thinking that as a local institution, it should also serve its local constituents, its local communities. And tribal nations are part of those communities. So we facilitate partnerships between the academic units and institutions within Arizona State University to leverage those expertise and resources for the benefit of tribal nations. So there's a number of different institutions and colleges within ASU that do a lot of work with tribal communities in the areas of research and applied research. So the Tribal Technology Assessment, the State of Internet Service on Tribal Lands, was recently published in September of this year. It was initially formulated or thought of in 2016 when individuals like Jeff Blackwell and Matt Rantanen had become part of the advisory board for our institute. And one of the primary directives that came out in terms of recommendations for our work was to develop an academic and replicable quantitative study of broadband access, device use, and uses of the internet by tribal peoples on tribal lands. Now, unfortunately, this was limited to only the reservation land bases within the 48 contiguous United States. So we did not include Native Hawaiians or Alaska Natives in our study because one of the primary reasons was we wanted to see what kind of data we could come up with that showed actual reservation access, and specifically within tribal people's homes. So I'm going to provide a general overview, that was part of it, and then go through the quantitative, qualitative findings of our study and wrap it up with a conclusion in terms of some of the policy recommendations we came up with. So as I had mentioned, Jeff and Matt were part of our research team. They helped with formulating the questions. Another one of Jeff's colleagues, Irene Flannery from AMERIND, also helped with formulating the questions, being a former staff person at the FCC as well, Federal Communications Commission. We also had individuals within Arizona State University that have primarily research and policy backgrounds and expertise in tribal affairs that help formulate the study questions. So this is tribally driven participatory research, and that meaning that we did have community input from community leaders and stakeholders to formulate the survey questionnaire. And it was initially conceived as a priority of the National Congress of American Indians and the Native American Financial Officers Association. And as I mentioned, tribal leadership worked with AIPI in all phases of implementation and coming up with the survey questionnaire. So it's a quantitative study. We use the Qualtrics platform that Arizona State University utilizes. We were human subject research exempt, meaning in part of the institutional review board that we had to go through the process, it's mainly to identify if any sensitive information, personal information from individuals being surveyed is going to be collected. We only collected information about tribal affiliation, meaning federally recognized and enrolled, and zip code information. So we did not collect any names or personal identifiers of that. They're considered human subject research exempt. So we disseminated the survey at public events, powwows, and art markets off reservation. ASU has a very strict IRB, Institutional Review Board process, because of some unfortunate occurrences where they've exploited Native peoples in the past. So they're very conscientious of ensuring that we're not collecting any information that's going to be not beneficial to tribes. So we also used email lists and social media to distribute our survey. And the Qualtrics instrument allows for bifurcation of our data. So we're able to identify which information we collected in person through the survey at public events, but also which data we collected through social media and email. So some key points. The survey instrument sought to assess how individual tribal members on reservations were using the internet, access what they were generally using the internet for, who in the household had access to and was using the internet. We also asked questions around, was it available within the household, or did it have to travel off-site from without their residence to access the internet? And we also wanted to know where no access was available, and if no access was available, how they were accessing the internet. So a primary issue in addressing the digital divides in Indian country has been a lack of consistent and reliable data collection. The FCC has their own metrics in terms of how they collect internet availability on tribal lands. U.S. Census also has their different metrics, but so far, much of them have been either inaccurate or fragmented in terms of how they report connectivity on tribal lands. So this is an infographic of kind of the individuals that we had and what states they were from. So 95% of our respondents identified as enrolled as a member of a federally recognized tribe, and 73% of them resided on a federal Indian reservation. Part of our questionnaire that we included was, in addition to identifying a federally recognized member of a tribe, they also had to provide the zip code of what reservation they were from. So, and the reason why those numbers are a bit off, out of our total individual survey, which is around 244, I believe, only 160 actually met the criteria of being enrolled in a federally recognized tribe and also residing within a federal reservation. So the age distribution of our survey respondents were primarily from the age range of 30 to 49 years of age, but there's also a good split between the elderly population as well as the young population, the youth. And the primary income bracket that was identified by our respondents was between the $25,000 to $49,000 range, at 27% of our respondents identifying in that income bracket. And all of these infographics, I do have a note card that I did bring with me, so if you want copies of it, I can give it to you. So again, we wanted to know what people were going online to access the internet for, and of course, social media was a major item that individuals surveyed identified. So of course, Facebook being one of the primary avenues that individuals on reservation lands were accessing, in addition to email and YouTube. So our survey found that there was a huge reliance and use of mobile cell phone devices. 38% of our respondents identify using a smartphone to access the internet, followed by 22% with using a laptop or desktop, and 12% using a tablet. 27% identified using all three types of devices to access the internet. So again, we found that mobile was highly utilized. We wanted to be careful in writing our report, though, because we didn't want to state that mobile only was the solution to having internet access. One of the things that I think we'll look at in terms of doing a follow-up research report is looking at situational context. So for instance, you're not going to have students using a mobile cell phone technology to do online standardized testing. You're more respondents stating that they would rather use a laptop or desktop. Hold it up higher, right there. Okay. So again, high reliance and use of mobile technologies, but again, we didn't want to say that mobile only was a solution to bridging the digital divide in Indian country. In our survey, we did have a number of qualifier questions where if an individual had responded a certain way, it would trigger an additional question and maybe skip over a follow-up one. This was one of those initial qualifying questions where we wanted to know if an individual was using a smartphone, a personal smartphone to access the internet, a work smartphone to access the internet, so a work-issued smartphone, or a combination of both. One of the things that we had been hearing is that in some instances, residents of tribal lands would be utilizing a work-issued smartphone because their personal smartphone did not have access, whichever kind of communications plan that they were subscribed to. So predominantly found that they were using a personal smartphone to access the internet that wasn't work issued. And then this was one of the qualifier questions, that's why it's called Q14A. But that was in response to saying that they only used a smartphone to access the internet at their home. So we wanted to know, okay, well, how is your internet connectivity on that smartphone at home? 69% of our respondents stated that they had internet access all of the time, while 22% stated some of the time, with 9% saying none. Top 3 locations of internet use, predominantly wherever they could get cell phone reception. Also utilizing public Wi-Fi networks while patronizing a business. And of course, at a friend or relative's house. So you have a kid going over to grandma's house, they're going to get online. This is kind of another broad overarching infographic of our findings. 18% of residents with no internet access at home, wireless or land-based. 33% relying on cell phone service for at-home internet. 49% utilizing a land-based internet service provider such as cable, DSL, or dial-up. And 31% responding that they had spotty or no internet connection at home via a smartphone. So part of our report also wanted to highlight some policy recommendations. While we had the research aspect, the research findings, we also wanted to make sure that as part of our report, we were also providing recommendations to members of Congress, people within the administration that have authority to enactuate policy changes. So a lot of these actually came from our work with the National Congress of American Indians over a number of years, primarily resolutions that were adopted by tribal governments. So all of these are listed on the report. I want to keep on time. But I do have with me a fact sheet that goes through a lot of these recommendations, and I can also give you the link to our report that's located online. But some of these have been going on for a long time, so elevating the FCC Office of Native Affairs and Policy from underneath the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau so it can have direct, unfettered access to the commissioners and chairs at the FCC. One of the big ones that's been around since the 2010 National Broadband Plan has been to establish a tribal broadband fund to support deployment, maintenance, and technical assistance training for deployment on tribal lands. Spectrum, of course, has been an ongoing issue. It still is. So we also wanted to make sure that we had language in our policy recommendations stressing the need for tribal nation access to spectrum licenses. And then also allowing tribes the ability to challenge Form 477 data for inaccuracies on how deployment data is reported on tribal lands. So thank you. Any questions?
Okay, I actually have a question. Two questions actually. When you had the selections of, like for instance, how they use the internet, was it just an open field that they filled in, or did you provide, Facebook? You kind of cued them to say something, and then beyond that, same thing for the cell phone. So yeah, I'm using my smartphone. It's connected to Wi-Fi, but I'm on my smartphone. Were you able to distinguish that?
Yeah, so we did have a number of kind of check the box type of questions where we did ask specific types of applications, what types of applications they were accessing online. That's all included in the report. I didn't include it on the slide deck. But in terms of the device use, we did specifically ask laptop, computer, tablet, smartphone. One of the tricky things that we had was figuring out how do you ask what type of connection you have, what type of speed, because your normal everyday person is not going to be like, well, I have a 25 megabyte connection, They're going to say, oh, I subscribe to Cox, which is a cable company, or I subscribe to CenturyLink, which is a phone company. So we had to be very conscientious in terms of how we worded that language. So we came up with the basic identifiers of cable, DSL, dial-up, things like that. Any other questions? Yeah, you recognize it.
Great, over here.
Did you consider people using hotspot devices for home internet service, cellular hotspot?
No, I do not think that was an option in the study. I know that we had to reform our study a number of times. For instance, we didn't include flip phones initially as a device. Exactly. Jitterbug phones or whatever you want to call them. You're right. So you have one, right? But that was one thing we didn't consider, and it was an elder from Standing Rock that actually raised that issue with us, that came to that question and was like, well, I can't answer this because I don't have any of these devices. And I was like, well, what do you have? And he pulled out his flip phone. So we actually had to go back through our IRB process to reform our questionnaire. And we just made a note of that individual, so we went back and made sure to correct the information that was listed.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Ritzo, and I'm with Measurement Lab, which I'll talk about in a minute, but Lynn and I are both doing some projects where we're measuring internet service in public institutions. And so our session is going to just talk about those initiatives and what that means and why we might want to measure internet service. So I came to this community after being involved as a school librarian in a reservation community in the U.S. Several years ago, and now I work for Measurement Lab, which is, I'll talk about it in a moment. And Lynn.
And my name is Lynn. I work at an organization called Cybera. We run the Research and Education Network in the province of Alberta. We also do a lot of advocacy work around access to internet within our province, and so this is where our interest came in around data collection, which we'll talk about in a little while.
So we each have a series of slides which we'll talk through very quickly, and then I think the goal is to try to have a conversation about measurement with you all. So I'll start. So Measurement Lab, this is my contact information and a link to my slides, a link to our website. Measurement Lab is a program within Code for Science and Society, a nonprofit organization based in Portland, Oregon, whose focus is to support technology projects that produce open data, open science, public interest focused goals. And Measurement Lab specifically is a platform that, well, what we do is we host servers, and on those servers are internet measurement tests, which anyone can run from their web browser or other ways. And the data that gets submitted can be used by anyone as well. It's openly available and published in the public domain. My role at Measurement Lab is community support and engagement, as well as documentation and data analysis. So real quick about Measurement Lab, we are a joint initiative between Code for Science and other organizational corporate partners and university partners. Our data is open, user contributed. It's a longitudinal data set of coming up on 11 years now of open internet measurement data. And the platform itself is infrastructure. It's servers hosted in a variety of places around the world. And when you run a test, you get directed to the closest server. So our mission is quite ambitious, but it's accomplished through partnerships. Our core team is only 8 people right now, and most of that is running that infrastructure. But we also have some interesting programs in sort of smaller scale research that we're starting to do with communities, with community anchor institutions, and others to collect data. This is just a quick map of where we are in the world. That's a map. I can't really see the outline of the world on it, but we're a global project. And one of our goals is to try to make that data accessible and usable to others. So this is a image of one of our tools on our website where you can select a city or a region in the world and see the aggregate data, see average speeds and comparisons between tests that are run from one ISP in that community compared to others, or multiple ISPs within a province or state or country, and to see the comparison in the submitted data. And the project that I wanted to talk about, which aligns with the project that Lynn will talk about, is a funded program with Simmons University through the Institute for Museum and Library Services, a federal agency in the United States that gives grants to libraries and library-related organizations. Our program is a participatory program where we're partnering with libraries in the U.S. over last year and then through next May to build an open source measurement system that allows anyone to run our tests automatically from whatever locations they choose. In this case, within public libraries where they're serving patrons with the internet. And the goal is to understand the general trends in performance of speed and latency of those connections in the libraries and how that may or may not impact the library's ability to provide service to those patrons and meet their digital needs. So the goal at the end of next summer is a toolkit, essentially, that anyone could replicate. and repeat and host in their own home or in their school or library or other locations. This is a little bit of repeat information, but essentially a device that goes someplace and allows data to be collected automatically. This is some pictures of some of the libraries we've gone to, everywhere from, in the first year, from southeast Alaska to southern Florida, and parts in between. And in the second year, we'll scale to 50 more libraries. The first year, we had a very hands-on approach where we sought relationships with public libraries and their IT staff through our advisory board, who recommended different libraries to participate. And then we brought those staff together for a workshop to really kind of be in a room together and talk through the issues of broadband service and providing that in public libraries. All of that information fed into our plans for the second year, where 50 libraries will participate and receive a package of 2 devices and an instruction manual to plug them in. And so these are just some pictures of one sitting on the circulation desk in the lower left, and a in server rack in the top right, and then pasted on the side of a bookshelf in the lower left. And a call out to the session earlier today where Rob was facilitating and talking about research with communities. The funding has allowed me to come and be a part of ICS for the second time this year in order to build relationships with tribal communities who may be interested in participating. We haven't done a great job of including tribal communities at the beginning of this work, and we'll change that in the future. The only excuse I will give is that I'm not the research lead, but I'm the person who is involved with this community and have pushed for us to do more outreach. And so that's why I'm here and why I made time to come. Because even if no one says, hey, I want to talk to you about this right now, in the future we've been discussing a potential future project where we could work together. So if you're interested in that, come talk to me later. I'm happy to begin a relationship, begin a conversation here. So with that, I'll turn it over to Madeleine.
Okay, so I guess independently, we were doing similar projects. One of the things, so Cybera, maybe I'll backtrack a little. Cybera is a member-driven organization where we listen to our members, and members come to us with problems, and we see ourselves more as a facilitator of collaborations and partnerships. And so one of the projects that we were approached was to do getting internet data, because we know this is a real problem in Canada. And in Canada, Canada is basically mapped out in hexagon squares of 25 kilometers that indicate whether your area is connected or not connected. But the hexagon is 25 kilometers, and we don't really know within those hexagon squares where those data points are coming from. All the data points could be concentrated in one small area, and the rest of the hexagon isn't connected, and that data isn't captured, which means that when communities want to go and apply for funding, they might not have the data available to say that, yes, I actually don't have data, even though I'm in a hexagon that says I actually have a lot of connectivity. So what we were trying to do is build a partnership within a number of provinces in Canada. So we built relationships with the First Nation Technology Councils within BC, Alberta, and Manitoba. The idea is, obviously, we don't have the relationships with the communities that these technology councils do, and the idea was to work with them to reach out to the communities to get little inexpensive devices into the communities to collect the data. So part of the reason we wanted to do this is we wanted to provide the basis of for communities to be able to apply for grants and to, I guess data is power, and so this is the first step of providing some data back to the communities. So what we did is we have purchased little Raspberry Pis. They're just inexpensive devices, circuit boards. We have created some code which will be open sourced, and we sent them out to the communities, actually the technology councils, and we've made them basically plug and play. And we currently have 37 devices in the communities, in Manitoba mostly at this point in time, and some in Alberta. But we spent a lot of time building a governance model before we even deployed any of the devices, because we wanted to make sure that we were respectful of OCAP principles and things like that. So we made sure that the data was owned by the provinces and the communities, and that we were the data was held within First Nation data centers. And also, we had decided to create a closed system to prevent hacks, to preserve the data in the terms of security. So right now, we have been running the Pis for a couple of months. We have 37 devices, and so we're getting some data, and mostly we're just collecting upload, download, and ping speeds, and no personal data. So in Canada, there's a minimum requirement of 5010 or recommended speeds, and you can see this is the upload data that we've been receiving so far. So only like a handful of the devices in the communities are actually meeting the minimum requirements, and we can also dig in a little deeper to some of this data.
Sorry, that mic is actually feeding into the other room. So you guys need to sit a little closer and share the mic.
I'll just move over to you.
Sorry. Thank you.
So we can dig in a little deeper. So in some of the data for Pis, for example, this device number 7, we can actually see in the previous graph it said that, for example, device number 7 actually reached minimum speeds, but we can see a time graph here in terms of when those times you were actually meeting minimum speeds, because usually when the data is calculated, they'll tell you, well, I've calculated your data and it's showing that you're reaching minimum speeds, but they don't actually tell you when that data is, you're actually meeting that minimum speeds. And what we're seeing as the average time people are actually having the best internet speeds is around 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and the worst internet speeds is like 11 and 12 when people are actually working. And we can see that consistently. So another example is device number 12, and we can actually see the anomalies on each of the hours, like when are the average speeds on each of those hours. So this is an example for download speeds. The story is quite similar here. And again, we can also dig in, and this is quite drastic. You can see 11 and 12 o'clock is really bad. So this is kind of the data that we've been getting. So our project ends in February. Our intent is to open source all the code that we have done and provide specs for all the material that we've purchased in case anyone is interested in doing something similar in their communities. Does anyone have any questions?
I like how they did that on the yesterday morning.
No, I just had a question for. Is it working? I don't know. Anyway.
Start talking.
Okay. I just had a question for Lynn. When are you going to open source that? After February 28th? Would you provide technical help for communities that want to set that up if they need it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have documentation.
Okay. Uh-huh.
But
Okay, awesome. That was my question.
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah. It is. It's on now.
Well, you're not on the live stream. Are you primarily documenting known phenomenon that you're expecting and trying to nail it down with evidence, or are you discovering new things that you weren't expecting?
Documenting things that we already know. So we know that the connectivity at the communities are really bad. I mean, so bad that they can't actually use the regular speed tests because I can't load the web page, which was the reason for us to do this. So what this does is collect the data behind the scenes using command lines, and also the way the measurement tests are currently being run, they aren't collecting the data that works with the communities because they do it all by postal code, whereas we do it by GPS, which is what we were suggested. So really we're catering to what works for the communities. And actually the data actually has brought out a lot of questions in some of our further discussions in where data is the first step. But then the next step, the questions are coming out, well, we see that the majority of the communities, the data is, the speeds are low, but why are the speeds low? We don't have that data, so is it because they can't access the speeds, they can't afford it, or are they actually purchasing more, but they're not getting the service that they're purchasing?
It's a great question, and similarly, we're running, I guess we're running existing tests. So the test you're running is speedtest.net, right? And we're also running that test as well as Measurement Lab's speed test that's called NDT. So in terms of analysis, I think your team has done a bit more preliminary analyses on the data, and we're just beginning to do that for our data. So it'll be interesting to see the comparison. I think, in our situation in public libraries in the United States, many of them have decent connectivity. So I think the outcomes and the findings we'll have will be different in terms of, depending on the location. So a library in Portland, Oregon that has, purchased their own transit from and runs their own network instead of buying service, let's say from a commercial provider, they have great service. But let's say Southeast Alaska, Hollis is on a satellite dish, more similar to what we might expect in a rural north community in Canada. So it will be very interesting to see. But I think the goal is for our program, at least currently, is to provide that tool set, that open source component, so that libraries could continuously measure the performance of their networks as opposed to a single or once a day or once a year type of measurement. And so what preceded our research was some studies in the academic community that works with libraries in the last 20 years or so, where they would do a survey generally about connectivity in the library and what types of computer services they're providing, how many computers, that sort of research. And one of those components was run a speed test. But again, it was just sort of a one-time test. And one of the things we encourage at Measurement Lab is to not just measure one time, but to look at the trend in measurements over time, which gives a better picture of sort of the longitudinal connectivity that the library has. So we're of course interested in other types of uses, like home measurement with this type of system, and we've been trading stories. And I think our program in the future could learn from yours, particularly on the consultation side, I think. And our system has developed perhaps a little bit more technically, and that's what we're hoping to do. Maybe is find some way to work together on a broader project across North America. Are there other questions about anything?
For the stakeholder groups and communities you've worked with, are there any kind of metrics or measurements that you all have found that are particularly useful for informing their decision making and how they get better connected? And then secondly, how are you all thinking about measuring like network reliability in addition to just things like latency and throughput and so forth?
Sorry, I didn't get the last part of the question.
How are you all thinking about measuring network reliability, or is that something that you consider as well?
I can speak to that specifically. So this was a challenge. Well, when we had the workshop that I mentioned, obviously there was a mix of responses to a variety of questions, and one was about management of the network and reliability of the network specifically. And many libraries have multiple connections to the internet depending on the funding source or if it's a staff network, staff access versus patron access. And our grant had the remit to study public access. So there are tools, I think, that would complement the performance measurements that we're doing now on the network management side and the reliability side. So that's not something we're doing currently, but it is something of interest. And when we visited with libraries and their IT staff, one of the things we asked about were those data sources that they already had. Let's say like the total amount of data uploaded and downloaded over time through their main switch or something. If we had that data source, then we could provide a richer picture that would address some of that question. But that's going to be for future work.
So in our case, one of the problems that was brought up was also power reliability in terms of the network. We know that at times the power shuts off, and so we designed the devices to take that into account. If the power went off, it wouldn't break the device, and it would just power back on when the power came back.
Thank you. My name's Andrew Sullivan. I wondered if you could say something about the definition of the measurements here, because one of the things that I was really struck by was that hexagonal picture, right? What's happened historically is people have said, well, if you're inside this hexagon and something's available, then it works for you. And what your results obviously show is that, well, that ain't true. And I wonder for the people who are not so much interested in the measurement itself, like I'm a geek, this is the greatest thing ever, but for people who are more interested in what can you do with this, if you could say something about how you analyze what people have defined, because the people who defined what's on and what's off, what's good, what's working and what's not, they have set up the terms of this discussion, and it could be that those terms are not advantageous for the communities that are subject to them. So there may be something for policymakers to look at there.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, for us, we did actually capture more data, but when we analyzed the data wasn't consistent, and when we were working with our partners who were more familiar with the areas and the communities, they were telling us that the data that was being captured was not accurate, which is why we've focused just mainly on upload and download speed, and kind of have regarded some of the other data because they're telling us that data isn't correct. And so there might be other ways and other data that we may want to look at in the future that would help communities. And so I know a lot of the communities might not have like data science resources and things like that, and so that's one of our things that we're interested in doing is like, you get the data, but then what do you do with the data, and how do you use the data, and how do you interpret the data? And so this is our first step in doing that.
So I'll speak to the other side of your question, which is, there are government sources of data. So the commissioner or the FCC person was talking about that a little bit, in terms of in the United States, the providers submit twice annually where they provide service and what speeds it is, and sort of like the medium, what is it, cable, is it fiber, is it DSL, it's satellite. And of course, it's great to hear him acknowledge that they're working on making that data better. And so these tools essentially allow communities to collect measured data specifically about the conditions on the ground and using multiple methods, and as opposed to the sort of submitted maximums. So when you read the FCC's 477 data submission requirements, providers submit the maximum speed that they can provide in a given census tract or block. They don't even, well, we won't get into the complaints about that, but I could go on forever about this. But this is a sort of using data and tools to collect it, to speak truth back out to that power regime, to say, we can collect this data, and there are open platforms to do that now. And I think the goal of our program with libraries is to make those tools more accessible to use within communities. What do we do with the data? How do we analyze it? I think one of the outcomes of our study is very similar to what you were mentioning about how do we present that data so that it's accessible to public librarians and meaningful also for their IT people. Many IT staff at public libraries will already have sources of data to understand the performance of their networks. So we did have some staff say things like, well, is this what we need? We already have the scale and staff and expertise to interpret this information. But they've come on board to the program because they know that the scale of library location is not the same as, let's say, a rural library in Alaska or rural Oklahoma, for example. The other thing that we found is an interesting connection to the research and education system of the networks of the internet, of which Cybera is one in Canada. One of the other partners on our program is Internet2's Community Anchor Institution, and I neglected to mention that. But of course, before the internet was commercialized, education, schools, libraries were connected by a nonprofit system of networks, and they still are. And sort of both of our programs have strong connections to those communities, or if not, are part of them. So that's a really interesting component, I think, in sort of the public interest side of things, the community-driven data collection. So it's our hope that these tools will empower communities to have data to support their advocacy with their elected representatives or with government agencies in that ongoing conversation for better data to support, who gets to apply for subsidy money and where in order to improve that service.
I just wanted to mention, when we started the conversation, we asked, what kind of data are you interested in getting back? And we kind of got blank stares. So, at a minimum, we wanted to start with upload, download, and ping. And what happened was we started getting some data back, and we started showing some data to our stakeholders, which is, there's actually two in the room, Rob and Denise. It started conversations about, well, that's really interesting, the data you're getting. Wouldn't it be interesting if we could do this and this? And so we see this as a start of a conversation to dig in deeper, to actually get the data that they need, the communities need for what they're trying to address.
Time for one last quick question.
Thank you. Chris Mitchell again. Latency, there's a number of interesting things you can measure that I think are straightforward. Do you have any sense of how we would measure reliability in a meaningful way that could be standardized?
So latency, you mentioned, is, I think, just off the cuff, I don't have a rote answer, formulaic answer for that. But that is something I'm interested in as well. Latency, of course, is a measure of quality of service. You know, if you have a very, very strong connection, but you have very, very high latency. So if your connection is 50 by 10 or 25 by 3, but your latency is super high, you know, some applications aren't going to handle that very well. So, you know, telemedicine, for example, would you want your doctor on the other end of a really highly latent connection that sort of, you know, the corollary is the Netflix, you know, or Hulu, whatever streaming service sort of buffering, right? You don't want that to happen if you're in the middle of some sort of important medical position. You know, a consultation, you know, conversation is one thing with your doctor over a long range link. You know, other applications like, you know, online education, you know, so many communities in Canada, for example, are connecting over distance ed and video conferencing, and that just kind of breaks down. It's not as stable when the latency is high. So latency is part of it, I think, for me. And then the other thing I would mention is the stability of the connection over time. So that measurement, not just one time, but if we measure 4 times a day, which is what our system does, a randomized schedule, and then in 2 or 3 months, or however long, maybe we increase the frequency, you know, if we want to collect data faster, we can get a trend of, like, say, like you were showing in the different hours of the day, the general trend is that in the afternoon, things really break down. You know, so that's a measure of reliability as well. I'll also mention that, just if we have a quick second, you had mentioned training and user education. And that's kind of an outcome of our program that's sort of an early analysis, as we met with librarians and their IT folks to understand, like, how should we present this data for them to get, to understand, to do something with. We're very much considering, you know, their level of, you know, where are they at with respect to taking the data they might already have to understand and interpret so that they can communicate about it with their boards or with funding agencies or organizations and grants. And one thing we've proposed as a follow-on grant, if we get funded, is to take all the lessons learned from this project and develop some professional development training modules for essentially the professional development of librarians with data that they may have. So, for example, some librarians may have said, we really would like to know sort of the trend in how many people are using the Wi-Fi over a given time. And they're not really required to report on anything but the number of sessions that they have in a given month. But they have the data to dig deeper into that question, like what are the general trends in usage of Wi-Fi. And they just need a little professional development, I think, to understand and learn how to work with network data or ask the right questions to get that data in the format that they could use from their IT folks.
Awesome. Let's say a huge thank you to our panelists. We appreciate it.
ISOC gets all the notes from all the readouts. So this next session is about looking forward. We want to take just 5-10 minutes on thoughts of what's come, and again, to use some of the stuff that's come from the policy discussion, some of the partnership. We have some minutes here to look forward a little bit. I can start. I think that when it comes, I can tell you, when it comes to the Federal Communications Commission in the United States, and I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but there needs to be a platform for the discussion, and sometimes that's when the FCC will release something or create an open docket, something where they're signifying that they're going to make a decision or take in information. And on this point of meaningful engagement, there is one that is immediately available. And it has to do with rules that require companies that get subsidies from the FCC to meaningfully engage with the tribal nations on whose lands they're deploying their services, where these federal subsidies are being used. And it goes to, I think, the next level of information that Dara was presenting. It goes to feasibility, sustainability, build-out plans, how laws, other federal laws like repatriation or cultural protection laws will be, federal laws will be complied with, and also tribal laws. So I know that ISOC has started some outreach to gather some input to possibly see about commenting on this docket. That is something that's in the near-term future. Are there other items that people think about as they thought about the last couple days? Yes.
Thank you. So in Canada, there's an obligation to consult First Nations, Inuit, and Métis on major development, and I would say that telecommunications projects would fall within that category, and I like that requirement in FCC to sort of have meaningful engagement. What I would recommend from the Canadian experience is that we determine what meaningful engagement looks like, and right now, for the most part, I don't know what's in the States, but it's not very well written or guidelines. While every nation is not identical, the elements for good, meaningful engagement are fairly universal. And it would be, I think, useful to sort of begin to have that a little bit of a guideline or framework, which just speaks to, contact the First Nations, contact and so you've got almost not so that it's a checklist, because that's kind of a problem. It just becomes a tick box, but you do need to have some sort of map that allows companies and others that aren't on the reserve or in our communities know who to go to, and otherwise it's not generally very good.
So this is you're right. Sometimes it is easiest if there is guidance and not necessarily a checklist, but things to do that operate almost as a checklist to work with Indigenous populations and tribal nations. This may be a very important, Katie, this may be a very important topic to maybe hold a webinar on, because so the FCC adopted rules. They're just about this big on a page in the rules, but the Office of Native Affairs and Policy, the Wireline Competition Bureau, and the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau in July 19th, 2012, and I can only remember that because that was my birthday, released a public notice of about 7 pages of guidance. It was fascinating that there were industries, there were companies and an industry association that petitioned that public notice for reconsideration. They fought back on the public notice. The experience of tribal nations, at my employer, AMERIND, we've hosted meetings of tribal nations and our major Western carrier, CenturyLink, a couple of the smaller carriers, providers in New Mexico, and members of our state legislature, several tribal leaders from the region to talk about this engagement, because the tribes came to us and said, we're disappointed because we're receiving information, but there's large pieces of it redacted, and we don't know. Or we're being sent everybody's information for the state, and we only really want the information relevant to our tribe, or it is not segregated out in a way where we can read the information clearly about our tribe. So I find it also very interesting that the FCC's public notice, and it's a very short public notice, it raises the issues that industry has had with tribes, but not that the tribes has had with industry. So they really do need some input. So other topics, engagement. What about from the partnership opportunities? We know there was NANOG was here and wanted to talk about the potential of having some, bringing individuals to NANOG for training. Other topics that came out of the table for forward-thinking, forward-looking?
I'm Andrew. One of the critical things I think that this meeting shows is how important it is for people to get hold of the stuff and do things themselves. If you're waiting around for large thing, whether it be government or large corporation or something like that, to come in and do it, it ain't going to happen. And so what we got to do is remember the internet way. We build little networks and then we connect them together and so on. That's the way. That's what got us this far, and that's the thing that we got to take forward. But what that means, of course, is that you got to find other people who are interested in that too. And so the thing we got to start searching for are, companies, for instance, who are interested in this market, who are interested in indigenous markets, who are interested in rural markets, who are interested in the geography where you are. We've got to find political common ground where we can make common cause with various people who have the same kinds of interests, because that's really the way that this stuff is going to get built. You're not going to do this 1,000 people at a time because people will just ignore you. Whereas if we can find 1,000 here, 1,000 there, 1,000 there, pretty soon you're talking real numbers. And that's really how these things get built. There are dozens of ways, dozens of models, and what we have seen over the last 10 to 15 years, especially in the internet industry, has been a tendency towards sort of, ginormous things and sort of centralization and so on. But that's not the whole of the internet, and it's obscuring our ability to see the potential for these kinds of alliances. So one of the things that I think is really important here is to be able to do that kind of exchange, because people can say, hey, I worked with these people and they did something for me, and so on, and you can start to build up those networks. I think that that's a really critical thing. That's one of the things that the Internet Society exists to try to help with. So to the extent we can be helpful, please call on us, because that's what we would like to do. We can't do things for, and we are the Internet Society, not the Internet bossy pants. So that means that we have to inspire these kinds of connections rather than actually doing things for other people. It's not doing for in those cases. Typically it's doing to, and I really don't like to live that way. So I want to collaborate, and I want to make sure that we find those paths. Similarly, if you find that we're not holding up our end of the log, tell us to pick it up, because that's part of my job. So thank you very much for all this participation.
The ISOC by Andrew Sullivan. Wonderful. Thank you very much. So thank you. And it dovetails wonderfully with the ethic of Indigenous self-determination. So I think we need to bring this to an end. I'd like to say just a few words, and then I want to turn over to our host, Mark, and his staff. I am profoundly grateful as an American Indian man of 50 years who've worked in this area for almost half my life. I find myself in a room that has brought me to tears and excited me. I remember 20 years ago when we were talking about the potential of young Native people writing apps, of language being shared, of operating networks, wireless, of changing our situation. I've had the honor to serve in the United States federal government. I've had the honor to serve on boards. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, what happens and what doesn't happen. And I feel very fortunate to have been invited by ISOC to be your MC. I haven't done this in a long time. It's kind of fun. So thank you very much for your patience. I think I should probably apologize and explain this. I usually don't have facial hair. There are a lot of people who've told me, wow, I've never seen you. At AMERIND, the men in our company, we participate in Movember. We try to do the Movember challenge to share awareness of men's health. My grandfather, whose name I inherited, passed with colon cancer. So that's one of the things I lead at my company. I think I should also, I'm teased all the time for having lawyer hands. They're very soft. I don't stack wood. I realize now that, as a tribal businessman, I play a lot of golf too, so I have lawyer feet. They're very light. And I'm very excited. I have a goal to play golf in all 50 states, and now I'm going to add one territory in the Northwest Territories to that. So try to get up north. Thank you very much. Such an incredible collection of knowledge and gifts of knowledge. The last thing I do want to say is an invitation to join when we launch it, and we are. We are deliberately working towards it and kind of pushing the boundaries and talking about it, the North American Indigenous chapter of ISOC. And I want to reiterate something that I should have done a better job about last year, or yesterday. I come from a multicultural family. I'm about 70% American Indian. My father was Choctaw and Chickasaw. My mother is Muskogee Creek and Omaha. And there are parts of our family that genuinely would not have survived had there not been non-Indians who had married into our family and saw us through very difficult times. I work for a company now, AMERIND. We're about 50% American Indian. I used to work in an organization, the Federal Communications Commission, where I was the only Indian. That was kind of difficult at times. Now I work in an organization where it's very easy to be an American Indian. But the true strength in our company is the diversity of our company. It's that there are many non-Indians who have come to work with us. And they didn't grow up where we grew up, but they threw in with our lot, and they've cast in with our lot, and they're down with our mission, and they're working with us. And they are a very strong part of our company. And I would say the strength also that has sustained our company. So when it comes to the North American Indigenous chapter, it is not just for Indigenous folks. We want to cast our net broadly, and we want to invite anybody who wants to be involved with us in our issues and wants to make our issues your issues as well to come with us. So with that, I would like to invite Mark to come up and make some closing remarks. Mado.
Thank you, sir. So we have about a minute before the buses get here, so I'll make this really, really quick. I have a note from Kelly telling me to tell everyone to join the Internet Society and then join the ISOC Hawaii chapter or the Indigenous chapter when that's going. Or both, or all. Also, Kelly will be emailing everyone to ask if you would like to join an alumni listserv. This is something we haven't done in the past. This is the third summit, and we haven't been so good at keeping the conversation going with everyone in the room. I mean, Jeff and I and Matt and I and others, we talk all the time, but it would be great if we could bring open that tent a bit. Yeah, that would actually be really good. So you'll hear from Kelly. And just absolutely, we have to thank our sponsors, because without them, this would be a very different meeting. We'd be eating hot dogs on the street. And we would have had to hitchhike from the hotel here. Google, Facebook, Baycells, Sierra, Internet Essentials, Comcast, Hawaiian Tel, and Iris Tel were very gracious to support us in this effort, and I greatly appreciate that. And a few thank yous. Thanks to Jeff. It was about 5-6 months ago. We had no idea of what Hawaii was like or what to expect, and I asked Jeff to come with me to Hawaii to meet some people and be shown what it's like here and what we need to do. And it was eye-opening, but Jeff is really the one who's responsible for ensuring that everything worked out well, and we can't thank you enough. That was absolutely incredible. So not just an MC, an integral part of the conference altogether. And Linnea, who I think has left, but Linnea has been, she was tremendously helpful too. I'll have to thank her when we get back to Honolulu. And finally, the team, this isn't an easy event to put together, just so you know. This is a really challenging event. This year may have been easier than last year, where we're 200 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle, but the staff did an amazing job. They really did.
Yeah. Katie and Anna, Hosine, Kyle, Kelly, wherever she went, I'm not sure. Ah, there she is. Yes. Andrew for signing the checks. You're going to get a few. But yeah, thank you. Sign up for the listserv, and thank you, everyone, and hopefully we can see you next year. Oh, and Greg. Yes, well, you're behind me. Thank you so much.